Hello guys. Welcome to Proxima What Ifs. So in this video, we will see the What if Rimuru Tempest went in Jujutsu Kaisen verse Rimuru vs Gojo. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's dive into the story. Chapter 1. A new realm in the rising tempest. A warm, crackling hum filled the Tokyo sky late at night, like static clinging to the darkness. On a narrow street flanked by tall, neon-lit buildings, the air shimmered with an otherworldly disturbance. A few stray curses mottled, shapeless shadows crawled at the edges of the dimly lit alley, drawn by the sudden surge of energy. They hissed and shrank back, as if instinctively terrified by whatever was about to emerge. Rimuru Tempest stepped forward in a swirl of distorted space. One moment, there was an empty stretch of concrete. The next, a figure materialized as though he had always been there, simply hidden from view. He was not imposing in size, but an unmistakable aura clung to him. The very air around him felt charged, crackling with power beyond comprehension. Any casual observer would have sensed it too. This was no ordinary person. The curses didn't wait for an invitation. They lunged, twisted limbs of dripping darkness and hungry mouths snapping. Rimuru's eyes flicked to them, and in the brief flicker of city lights, he looked almost curious, like someone idly watching pigeons in a park. Then he raised a hand, and something invisible burst from his fingertips. The curses disintegrated mid-attack, their half-formed shrieks echoing for a moment before fading into silence. Not a single motion was wasted. Rimuru dusted his sleeves more in affectation than a necessity and surveyed his surroundings. Cars rolled by a few streets away, their headlights casting erratic shadows. The overhead signs buzzed with neon brilliance, painting the pavement in shifting patterns of light. He breathed in, tasting a new realm's air for the first time. He'd been in countless situations since gaining consciousness in his own world. He'd fought demon lords, forged alliances with dragons, united nations. But this place was different. The undercurrent of cursed energy that threaded through the atmosphere piqued his interest. It was dark and volatile, yet strangely alluring. And he could feel something else in the distance, someone powerful, multiple someones, in fact already homing in on his presence. He let out a quiet chuckle. "They're quick here," he murmured to himself, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Interesting. A flash of movement caught his eye. Dropping silently from a nearby rooftop, a lean sorcerer in dark clothing landed a few meters away. Another figure, slightly shorter, followed suit. Their stances were cautious, but neither looked panicked. They must have felt that wave of power from afar. Rimuru watched them with casual curiosity. The first sorcerer, a tall woman with a wrapped naginata strapped to her back, gave him a measured stare. Her hair was tied back tightly, accentuating the sharpness of her gaze. The second was a young man with wary eyes and a stance that hinted at readiness for combat. Before anyone spoke, a ripple of recognition and unease passed between them. People who wielded cursed energy could sense threats, but this was different. Rimuru's aura was like a black hole in the night. Dense, unyielding, and impossible to ignore. He offered a polite dip of his head. "Good evening," he said, voice smooth and carrying just the faintest hint of amused confidence. "I believe you felt me arrive?" The woman tightened her grip on her naginata. "Who are you?" "Rimuru Tempest," he replied, letting the name settle in the open air. "And you?" "Doesn't matter," she said, her posture shifting. "What are you?" Rimuru's smile lingered. "A traveler, you could say, though that might be an understatement." The younger man kept his eyes on Rimuru's hands, presumably checking for any sign of a curse or technique about to be unleashed. "That power," he murmured under his breath. "It's monstrous." "Easy." Rimuru's gaze shifted to him briefly. "I'm not here to fight unless I have to." But words alone did little to assuage their instincts. A moment later, the tension snapped. The woman whipped out her naginata. The blade reflected the neon signage in a quick gleam of color. She didn't lunge yet, her posture said she was about to test him, measure his reaction. The alley lights buzzed overhead in a hush that felt deafening. A flicker of movement from the corner of Rimuru's eye made him glance back. More curses were clustering behind a dumpster, drawn like moths to flame by the dense energy swirling around them. He sighed. "Let me handle that." He raised one hand as if beckoning them. Without a visible explosion or flash, the curses were simply gone. dispersed into dust, devoured by an invisible force that neither sorcerer could fully comprehend. The woman's eyes widened, and the young man took an involuntary step backward. There was no question now Rimuru was something far beyond their normal scale. Even powerful curses required exorcism spells or specialized techniques. He had simply looked at them, and they vanished. The woman's knuckles tightened on her weapon. "What did you do?" Rimuru shrugged. "Cleaning up. No need for more curses to pile in." An uneasy pause passed before she nodded, lowering her naginata a fraction. The young man flicked a look at her, searching for direction, and she gave a tiny shrug in return, just enough to say, "We need to see how this goes." She turned back to Rimuru. "There's a place we can talk if you're willing to come quietly." Rimuru took a moment to consider. This world was new. He didn't sense malice from these two, just caution. He gave a small nod. "Lead the way." Yet no sooner had they made that tentative agreement than a fresh wave of cursed energy flared somewhere overhead. It was distinct, oddly refined, accompanied by a rolling sense of pressure that made the hairs on the back of the woman's neck stand upright. The pair of sorcerers tensed. Rimuru simply glanced up. A figure descended from above in a blur of white and black. He landed gracefully, pulling off a blindfold in one smooth motion. Sparkling blue eyes took in the scene with a curious tilt of the head, and a playful grin curved his lips. Well, Satoru Gojo said, voice carrying an easy humor. "I had a feeling I'd find something interesting tonight." The woman exhaled sharply, stepping aside. "Gojo-sensei." Gojo flashed her a grin, then turned his attention fully to Rimuru. There was that subtle shift in the atmosphere, the collision of two tremendous energies meeting for the first time. If the earlier presence from Rimuru had been a black hole, then Gojo's infinity was a living phenomenon. Intangible, unstoppable, the sense that any attacker would be halted before even grazing him. Rimuru's eyes glimmered with intrigue. He saw the nearly invisible layering of space around Gojo, an intangible barrier that seemed to bend reality. Fascinating, he thought. It reminded him of a well-forged anti-magic field, except it was even more elegantly constructed. Gojo, on the other hand, took only a fraction of a second to gauge Rimuru. He made no attempt to hide the wide, curious smile. "You're the source of that surge, aren't you?" "You could say that," Rimuru replied. "Well," Gojo casually scratched the back of his neck, as though deciding how to proceed. "My name's Satoru Gojo, and I'm usually the one who deals with the big guys around here. Since you don't look too shy about showing off power, mind telling me what you're doing in Tokyo?" Rimuru's shoulders rose in a mild shrug. "Passing through. It wasn't a planned arrival, but I don't intend to cause trouble unless trouble finds me first." The sorcerer's smile became a touch more serious. "That's good to hear. Too strong. You might attract the wrong kind of attention. Folks in my line of work can get jumpy." He took a step forward, but Rimuru noticed that their distance never truly changed. It was as if space itself elongated whenever Gojo moved, maintaining a precise gap. Rimuru, more amused than concerned, let his energy ripple outward in a faint wave, gently brushing against that barrier of infinity. Gojo's eyebrows twitched at the sensation. This stranger was testing him. The woman who had been ready to fight now stood quietly off to the side with her companion, eyes darting between Gojo and Rimuru. The tension was thick enough to taste. Rimuru broke the silence. "I suppose this is where you decide if you need to exorcise me like a curse, or invite me to tea." Gojo's grin reappeared. "I prefer tea, personally, but a small demonstration never hurts." Without warning, he whipped an arm forward, a flicker of cursed energy slicing through the air. Rimuru sensed it. A compressed wave of force aimed right at his torso. He didn't flinch. In the blink of an eye, he analyzed the composition, recognized it was meant to test him rather than kill him, and neutralized it with a casual flick of his wrist. Blue sparks fizzled out around him. The alley grew quiet again. Gojo's lips parted in genuine surprise. "You dismantled that so easily." His tone carried no hostility, only wonder. Then, before Rimuru could respond, he launched another technique, a precise, invisible strike that could warp space itself and usually cut curses to ribbons. Rimuru let the force wash over him, his own energy devouring it like a stone dropped into a bottomless well. Gojo let out a low whistle. "All right, color me impressed." Rimuru allowed a half smile. "You're not bad yourself." The two stood for a moment, each measuring the other's response. But there was no malice in Rimuru's stance, and Gojo, despite his playful exterior, wasn't reckless enough to antagonize someone who could shred his attacks so casually. The woman with the naginata finally cleared her throat. "Should we report back?" Gojo shrugged, stepping away from Rimuru and sliding a hand into his pocket. "Sounds like a plan. But this guy is no curse, that's obvious. Maybe a special guest." He turned his attention back to Rimuru. "Rimuru Tempest, was it? Would you mind coming along so our higher-ups can meet you? I promise I won't chain you up, unless you do something crazy." Rimuru resisted a laugh at Gojo's feigned casualness. "I'll behave, lead on." They left the alley and headed toward a row of parked vehicles. The faint glow of streetlights reflected off the glossy paint of an unmarked car. Climbing in, Rimuru found himself idly amused by how easily he was stepping into their domain. But then, that was his nature. He didn't mind exploring new places or meeting new people, especially if they showed some promise of excitement or challenge. And this world was already brimming with both. The drive through nighttime Tokyo was surreal. The city lights reflecting off tall glass skyscrapers, the neon signs painting the darkness in vibrant pinks, blues, and greens. Rimuru sat in the back seat, the woman at the wheel, her companion riding shotgun, while Gojo followed on foot, leaping across rooftops with that signature flamboyance. Occasionally, Rimuru looked out the window, spotting a flash of white hair as Gojo kept pace with the car by bounding from building to building. He sensed prying eyes, too likely lesser sorcerers or curses that had picked up on the spectacle of his arrival. Some scurried away the moment they caught a hint of Rimuru's aura. Others lurked, curious or malevolent, but never daring to approach. Arriving at a tall, gated compound, Rimuru felt the distinct presence of concentrated cursed energy again. This must be Jujutsu High. The architecture was an interesting blend of traditional and modern, with a wide courtyard rimmed by concrete walls and an imposing main building beyond. Spotlights illuminated a pathway leading inside. Rimuru stepped out of the car. He glanced around to see a few uniformed students gawking from a distance. Their whispers reached his ears, full of questions. Who is that? Why does he feel so strong? Is he an ally or an enemy? He didn't need to read minds. Their body language said it all. They were cautious, but there was none of that usual scorn or dismissal that powerful newcomers sometimes faced. It was more like awe, as though they already understood they were in the presence of something extraordinary. A younger woman with short hair, a fierce aura, and a metal hammer dangling at her hip strode closer. She gave Rimuru a careful once-over before folding her arms. "So, this is the big shot causing all the fuss?" "Play nice, Nobara," said the tall woman from before, giving a slight eye roll. Then she turned to Rimuru. "My name is Maki Zenin. This chatterbox is Nobara Kujisaki. The quiet one up front was Toge Inumaki. And if you see a talking panda roaming around, you're not hallucinating." "Good to know." Rimuru flashed a friendly smile that seemed to catch Nobara off guard. "I'm Rimuru." She gave a short nod, but her eyes flicked up and down him warily. "You don't look that scary." Maki, Toge, and Nobara had probably heard the rumors swirling that an impossibly strong figure had appeared, neutralizing curses with a wave of his hand, and gone toe-to-toe with Gojo, or at least with his initial attacks. The rumors all painted Rimuru as unstoppable. However, facing him in the flesh, Nobara found him oddly approachable. "It's usually the quiet ones you need to watch," Rimuru joked. "Or in my case, the ones who are too calm." Nobara pursed her lips, trying not to show the little flicker of interest in her eyes. She turned on her heel. "Whatever. If you start any trouble here, just know that we won't sit back and watch." Rimuru's smile deepened. "Fair enough." Gojo hopped down from a nearby wall, dusting off his jacket. "Let's head inside. The higher-ups would love a word. Though I'll warn you, it can be a bit of a snooze. They'll want to grill you, figure out if you're some new curse or threat to the balance." "And you?" Rimuru asked, cocking his head. Gojo laughed. "Me? I'm dying of curiosity, sure, but I'm more about practical tests than meetings. Once they see you won't blow up the campus, that'll be enough for me." They walked through the courtyard, past the curious students. Rimuru caught a few sideways glances, some filled with awe, others with wariness, but none with outright disrespect. That suited him well. He had no interest in playing the misunderstood outsider or the forcibly humble guest. If they recognized his power and accepted him for it, that was preferable. Inside the main building's halls, the group led him toward a traditional tatami room that doubled as a meeting space. A handful of older sorcerers waited, their postures stiff, their gazes razor-sharp. Rimuru felt their energies swirl, a tapestry of different techniques held at bay but still itching to be used, if necessary. One of them, an older man with a stern face, spoke first. "So you're the one who appeared tonight and caused that intense surge?" Rimuru inclined his head. "Yes. Apologies for the disruption." The man's jaw tightened, as if formality was the only barrier between him and suspicion. "Who are you? What are you? And why have you come here, of all places?" Rimuru answered with calm brevity. "Like I told Gojo, I'm a traveler from elsewhere. The details might not make much sense, but let's just say I crossed dimensions by accident. I didn't choose this place intentionally. I do, however, intend no harm." A low murmur spread among the older sorcerers. One of them leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Dimensional crossings are extremely rare. Are you aware that your arrival might cause an influx of curses drawn to your energy signature? I noticed curses gathering as soon as I showed up, I dispatched them to keep the area safe." A woman in her 50s, hair streaked with gray, eyed him critically. "And you claim you pose no threat? So far, your actions speak otherwise, though in a protective sense. But what if that changes?" Rimuru only offered a patient smile. "You're free to watch me closely if it eases your mind." He could have boasted, threatened, or tried to force them to bow to him, but that wasn't his style. He was confident, sure, but not out to pick fights for no reason. And, from the hush in the room, they seemed to feel the sincerity in his words. If anything, a more profound wariness slipped into their eyes. They were clearly thinking, "This guy is too calm, too relaxed for someone who wields that kind of power." But they couldn't fault him for any wrongdoing. One of the senior sorcerers cleared his throat. "We will have to deliberate. In the meantime, we request that you stay on the premises, so we can ensure everyone's safety." Gojo, leaning against a wooden column, gave a lazy wave. "In other words, they'd like to keep an eye on you. But consider it an invitation rather than an imprisonment." Rimuru gave an easy nod. "I'll stay as long as necessary." With that, the meeting reached a temporary lull. The older sorcerers broke into smaller discussions, probably deciding how to handle the political fallout of a being as potent as Rimuru wandering freely. He stepped back into the hallway, guided by Maki and Nobara. Nobara huffed. "So you're bunking with us for a while, is that it?" Maki smirked. "We've seen worse roommates, I guess." Rimuru's eyes danced with humor. "I promise not to keep you up with late-night rampages." Maki chuckled, unexpectedly warm. "Oh, I think I can handle that." She said it casually, but the moment lingered, a spark of tension passing between them. She was used to proving her strength to everyone. Maybe something about Rimuru's unwavering confidence intrigued her. As they moved through the corridors, Gojo took his leave, claiming he had something else to attend to but would be back soon to hang out. Rimuru and the two young women stepped outside into a quieter courtyard under the pale glow of lanterns. The night breeze ruffled the branches of a cherry tree in bloom, sprinkling petals across the neatly raked gravel. Nobara halted. "All right, I'm going to bed. This day's been weird enough." She shot Rimuru a final half-narrowed look. "Just don't do anything that makes me regret letting you walk around freely." Rimuru bowed his head in mock solemnity. "I'll be on my best behavior." She clicked her tongue, trying to hide a small smile, and disappeared into the building. Maki lingered. She crossed her arms, an unreadable expression on her face as she scanned Rimuru from head to toe. "You really don't hold back, do you? I felt those waves of energy in the alley like a black hole sucking everything in." "No sense hiding who I am," Rimuru replied. "And you?" "I don't hide either," she said firmly. Then, after a moment, her lips curved slightly. "You're interesting. Powerful, sure, but there's something else about you. Most guys that strong like to brag." "Maybe I brag in my own way." His smile held a playful edge. "I just don't talk about it unnecessarily." She laughed, a low, genuine sound. In that laugh, Rimuru sensed the spark of attraction, though Maki was far from the type to swoon at a moment's notice. It was more that she respected him, finding in him a reflection of her own determination. Or maybe it was the prospect of seeing someone who could match, or even surpass, her own unstoppable drive. He took a step closer, letting the moonlight illuminate his features. What's the next step? Rest, I guess. The old guys will talk all night about your arrival. Tomorrow, they'll probably want more questions answered. After that, if everything checks out, they might let you see how things run here. She turned to go, but Rimuru gently reached out, fingertips brushing her shoulder. She glanced back, eyebrows arched. He leaned in slightly, voice low. I appreciate you not attacking me on sight. She rolled her eyes. I was close to it, to be honest. Still. Thanks. Maki gave a small grin. For a heartbeat, the air sizzled with unspoken tension. Then she nodded, stepping away. Good night, Rimuru. She left him under the swaying branches of the cherry tree. After a few moments, he took a seat on a low bench and gazed at the moon. He liked the place already. The energy here was so alive, so different from the magicules in his home world. There was an edge to it, a sense that everything was riding on a razor's boundary, like one misstep could unleash untold devastation. Yet, oddly enough, that excited him. He was no stranger to challenges, and if there were interesting foes like Gojo around, or cunning enemies lurking, he welcomed the chance to flex his abilities. The memory of that brief clash with Gojo floated through his mind. He hadn't even needed to push beyond the barest fraction of his skill set. And yet, that fraction had stunned the so-called strongest sorcerer. It would be fun to see how far that man's infinity could go. Soft footsteps broke his reverie. He looked up to see another figure approach, a graceful woman with auburn hair. She wore a casual jacket over her uniform, her expression cautious, but not unfriendly. You're the new arrival, she said simply. Rimuru stood. Yes, I'm Rimuru Tempest, she cut in. I heard about you from the seniors. My name's Shoko Ieri. I'm a doctor here, or at least, the best we've got. I patch everyone up. He inclined his head. Pleasure to meet you. She stepped closer, arms folded. I can sense the tension around here. The higher-ups are freaking out. Even Gojo seems curious. It's not often he's that serious about a new face. Rimuru studied her, noting her calm, level gaze. He gave me quite a greeting. A faint smile touched Shoko's lips. I bet he did. There was a beat of silence, then she spoke again. Listen, I just wanted to say if you're here, it's best to keep a low profile. You might have no ill intentions, but a power spike like yours can attract complications. Rimuru didn't miss the concern in her voice. Noted. I'll do what I can. She gave him a nod, satisfied, and turned to leave. Stopping halfway, she glanced back over her shoulder. You don't strike me as a bad person, Rimuru. Don't let them convince you that you're the villain. Then she headed down the pathway, leaving him alone once more. He pondered her words. This realm was governed by an entrenched system of curses and sorcerers, and powers that be who likely disliked wild cards. As overpowered as Rimuru was, he had no desire to become an enemy to the entire world unless forced. A small grin played at his lips. He'd handle that if it came. An owl hooted somewhere on the school grounds, and a faint breeze drifted by. The night was peaceful here, for the moment. Rimuru inhaled slowly, letting the novelty of this dimension wash over him. Then, he rose from the bench and followed the path deeper into the campus, searching for a place to rest. He found a small guest room prepared for him, probably a hastily repurposed dorm room. The bed was Spartan, the furniture minimal, but it was quiet and private. He settled in, letting the day's events replay in his head. From the clash with Gojo to Maki's direct gaze, from Nobara's suspicious glares to Shoko's measured concern, everything hinted that he'd stepped into a realm where cursed energy was both lifeblood and threat. And somewhere in the distance, he felt it, a dark pulse, ancient and malevolent. It was like a rancid heartbeat drumming through the atmosphere. He smirked to himself, wondering if it was the rumored King of Curses he'd heard whispered in the corridors. As he drifted into a light doze, his senses remained on alert. He doubted he'd need to void hard. Even in the stillness, he was ready. He rose early the next morning, slipping out of the dorm to explore the campus before the hustle started. The sun had only just begun to peek over the horizon, casting the grounds in pale gold light. The wind carried the scent of dew and fresh grass. Barely had he stepped around a corner when he spotted a familiar figure leaning against a wall. Maki, arms crossed, eyes scanning for threats. Her posture relaxed when she recognized Rimuru. You're up early, she said. So are you. She glanced to the side, where a small training ground lay empty. Wanted to get some practice in before the day starts. Helps me clear my head. Rimuru cocked his head. Mind if I join you? She snorted. Think you can keep up? He let that challenge hang in the air for a moment. Then he walked past her into the training ground. The space was simple, a rectangular patch of dirt, some training dummies, and racks of wooden weapons. Maki followed, a faint grin crossing her face. Let's see what you've got, she said, picking up a wooden staff and balancing it in her hands. She gave it a couple of light swings, testing its weight. Rimuru selected a wooden sword. He was more than proficient with any weapon, but this realm's style might be different. Still, the fundamental principles wouldn't change. They stood several paces apart, the crisp morning air filling the space between them. Without further warning, Maki lunged. Her staff whirled in a tight arc, forcing Rimuru to duck. She pivoted, bringing it down from above, but Rimuru angled his sword to deflect. The force of her blow was impressive. She was physically stronger than most humans, thanks to her intense training and unique situation in the Zenin clan. Rimuru felt the impact reverberate through the wooden blade. He grinned and countered, swinging low toward her flank. She twisted and brought the staff up to block, sparks of friction flaring where they collided. The exchange continued in a flurry of quick strikes, each of them measuring the other's technique. Maki's hits were precise, powerful, unrelenting. Rimuru matched her easily, but he didn't push beyond a fraction of his real power, wanting to see her style. Not bad, he teased during a pause, their weapons locked against each other. She smirked, sweat beading on her brow. I can do better. She broke away, spinning the staff in a rapid flurry that aimed for his ribs, then his neck. Rimuru parried each strike with minimal effort, but he could see the determination blazing in her eyes. She wasn't just going through the motions. She was determined to prove something to him, to herself, maybe to everyone who ever doubted her. Rimuru decided to give her a bit of a push. He stepped up his speed by a notch, forcing her to adapt. Her eyes widened, but she met his attacks with surprising agility. The sound of wood clacking against wood filled the courtyard, echoing in the morning stillness. Finally, Rimuru feinted left, then tapped the edge of her shoulder with the wooden sword lightly but decisive. Maki froze, staff halted mid-strike. A single droplet of sweat trickled down her temple. Rimuru lowered his sword, smiling. I believe that's my point. She stood still, breathing hard, then gave a low laugh. You're playing with me, aren't you? His grin turned playful. Not entirely, you're quite skilled. She tossed the staff aside and stepped in closer than was strictly necessary. Her eyes narrowed in challenge. I hate being looked down on. I'm not, he assured her, voice gentle. If you wanted me to go all out, it wouldn't be fun for you, trust me. She took a moment to process that. Then, instead of bristling, she gave him a sly smile. Fun for me, huh? She closed the gap another fraction, her gaze flicking over his face. I can handle more than you think. The moment crackled. Their breaths mingled in the dawn light, tension rising in a way that was both combative and something else. Maki had never been the shy type. She was as direct in her personal life as she was in battle. Rimuru's voice dropped. You know, I believe you. He could have taken the opportunity to lean in, perhaps brush his lips against hers, but he decided not to push too far too soon. Instead, he stepped back, letting the charged air settle. Maki exhaled, running a hand through her hair. It was clear that something unspoken had happened, a spark dancing between them. Anyway, she said, clearing her throat to regain composure. I need to shower before classes start. The old geezers will probably call you in for more questions. Rimuru nodded. Right. Good spar. She picked up the staff and laid it back on the rack. Next time, show me at least a little more of what you're hiding. With that, she threw him a final glance, part challenge, part curiosity, and headed off. Rimuru stood there, the echo of her footsteps and the scent of morning air lingering. He grinned to himself. This world was shaping up to be anything but boring. Later that morning, he found himself summoned to another meeting room, though this time it was smaller and less formal. The higher-ups had evidently concluded their initial deliberations, and they assigned Gojo to keep watch over Rimuru's activities. Whether that was meant to be a parole officer or a tour guide was unclear, but Gojo was certainly excited about it. Let's do something fun, Gojo announced the moment Rimuru walked in. He had his arms spread wide, that signature grin on his face. I'm supposed to show you the ropes, but who wants to sit in a dusty library and read about cursed spirits all day? Rimuru raised an eyebrow. You have something in mind? Gojo clapped him on the shoulder. I happen to know of a small cluster of curses that's popped up in Shinjuku. Nothing too crazy, but a good place to see how things are done around here. And if you're up for it, you can show off again. Across the room, Maki and Nobara exchanged a look. Nobara rolled her eyes. That's your idea of fun? Gojo feigned a wounded expression. Come on, curses are our business. Plus, I suspect Rimuru won't mind a little field trip. Rimuru shrugged amiably. I don't mind, might be interesting. Gojo gave a thumbs up. Then it's settled. Let's go exorcise some curses, with our new buddy leading the way. The group Gojo, Rimuru, Nobara, and Megumi Fushiguro, who joined at the last minute, stepped onto a bustling street in Shinjuku. It was mid-morning, and crowds thronged the sidewalks. Neon signs and towering department stores gave the district its infamous vibrancy. Yet beneath all that, Rimuru sensed the writhing presence of curses lingering in the labyrinth of back alleys. They split up to cover more ground. Megumi and Nobara took one route, while Gojo and Rimuru took another. Every few minutes, Gojo would point out traces of cursed energy or note how the negative emotions of people in such a densely populated area fed lesser curses. Normally, Gojo explained, we'd rely on students to handle small fry curses. But these ones have been acting up, and it's near a heavily trafficked station. So we can't ignore them. Rimuru nodded. I sense about a dozen or so. Gojo cocked his head. You can feel them that clearly? It's not hard. Their presence is like a buzzing under my skin. Gojo grinned, impressed. You're full of surprises. They turned a corner and found themselves in a cramped alley behind a row of shops. The stench of stale garbage filled the air. A flicker of movement caught Rimuru's eye. Several curses, each shaped like hunched, ragged silhouettes crawling on all fours, circled a young woman who lay unconscious by a pile of trash. She was possibly injured, maybe a victim of some sort of mugging or collapse, but the curses were certainly not here to help. Gojo tsked under his breath. Poor thing. Let's hurry. Before Rimuru could respond, Gojo set off at a casual pace. One curse noticed HD. But the moment its twisted claws reached the edge of Gojo's infinity, it froze mid-air, suspended in a nightmarish pose. Rimuru stepped forward, letting his own aura pulse. The curses recoiled instinctively, hissing at the wave of power. He flicked a single finger, and two of them dissolved into black ash. Another tried to scuttle away, but Gojo snapped his fingers, erasing it in a blast of compressed space. In a matter of seconds, the alley was cleared. Gojo squatted by the woman's side, checking for injuries. He shook his head. She's in rough shape. Probably needs an ambulance more than anything, but we can't leave her like this. Rimuru knelt beside him, pressing two fingers to her temple. He concentrated, letting a tiny, healing fraction of his own power flow. In his home world, he was adept at healing magic, capable of repairing most injuries instantly. Here, the energy was different, but it responded well enough to his will. A soft glow enveloped the woman. Her breathing stabilized, and color returned to her cheeks. Gojo's eyes widened momentarily. You can heal curses and humans alike? That's not something we see every day. Rimuru shrugged. I do what I can. He sensed movement behind them. Another curse, lanky and saliva dripping, dropped from a rooftop, screeching. Rimuru barely glanced its way. A wave of intangible force snuffed it out instantly. Such an overpowered cheat, Gojo muttered with a grin, half joking, half impressed. He stood and pulled out his phone to call for medical assistance. Meanwhile, Rimuru carefully lifted the woman into a more comfortable position, wiping sweat from her brow. Through it all, he maintained that sense of calm composure. As they waited for an ambulance, they scouted the area for any more curses. A few minutes later, Nobara and Megumi arrived, having cleared another nest down the street. Nobara was panting lightly, hair askew. We had to chase a group of them onto the main road, then Megumi's dogs tore them apart. Good times. Megumi, stoic as ever, simply nodded. No casualties, though. Good job on your end. Gojo gave a light wave. Rimuru handled most of it. I barely got to do anything. Megumi's gaze drifted to Rimuru. That's surprising, given you're usually the show-off. Gojo pouted in mock hurt. Hey, I tried. A siren in the distance grew closer, the city's life continuing all around them. Once the paramedics took over the unconscious woman's care, the group reconvened in front of a small cafe on the next block. The tension of battle dissolved into a more casual atmosphere. People rushed by, oblivious to the near disaster that had just been averted. Nobara scowled, eyeing Rimuru with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant admiration. I keep hearing about how unstoppable you are. I didn't really buy it until I saw you flick those curses away like bugs. Rimuru offered a small shrug. They weren't very strong. She clicked her tongue. Yeah, but still. Her gaze slid to the side, uncertain. So, where'd you learn to do that? It's just part of who I am, he said, letting the statement stand. Gojo leaned in. He's basically a cheat code, that's what he is. Don't worry too much about the details. Just remember he's on our side for now. That's all that matters. Megumi's forehead creased in quiet thought. He observed Rimuru for a moment, then said, I have a feeling that any curse we encounter with him around will be wiped out in seconds. That's going to draw attention, maybe even from curses we haven't seen before. Rimuru could guess what he meant. Powerful curses thrived on conflict and fear. Something new and overwhelmingly strong would be like a beacon. Let them come, he said evenly. I'm not bothered. Nobara's lips curved in a small smirk, pretty cocky. Confident, he corrected, returning her look with a playful challenge in his eyes. She rolled her shoulders, brushing off a hint of a blush, same difference. They wrapped up their expedition and returned to the campus by afternoon. Word spread quickly about how Rimuru had effortlessly cleared a nest of curses, even healing a civilian in the process. Students eyed him with more open curiosity, some even approaching to say hello or ask questions. In a shaded corner of the courtyard, Maki found Rimuru resting on a bench. She tossed him a water bottle. Heard you made quite a splash in Shinjuku. He caught the bottle with ease, twisting the cap open. Gojo wanted to show me around. Ended up stepping on some curses. Must have been a stomp, she said, leaning against a pillar. Nobara and Megumi said you were unstoppable. Kinda ticks me off. Rimuru took a sip, unfazed by her tone. Why? She shrugged, but her eyes burned with ambition. I've worked my whole life to get stronger. People always look down on me because I can't see curses naturally and rely on cursed tools. I carved my place here through blood and sweat. Seeing someone just show up and casually crush everything in his path is frustrating. There was an honesty to her words that Rimuru respected. He stood, stepping closer. I understand. But I didn't get to where I am without challenges. It's true I have certain advantages, but I still know the taste of struggle. Maki studied him, trying to gauge the sincerity in his words. Then she released a breath. Well, at least you're not crowing about how easy it all is. He let the silence hang. She looked away, a bit uncomfortable with the rawness of her own confession. Then he reached out, fingertips just brushing her jaw, guiding her to look him in the eye. It was a bold gesture, but the air between them demanded it. Maki, he said softly, your strength is your own. Don't measure it against mine. We're on the same side, right? She blinked, pink rising to her cheeks. Why yeah, we are. A slow smile curled his lips. Then, on a sudden impulse, he leaned in and pressed a brief, confident kiss to the corner of her mouth. It was barely more than a graze, but it lit a spark in her eyes. She stiffened momentarily, her cheeks flushing deeper. He pulled back just enough to meet her gaze, waiting to see if she'd push him away or lash out. She didn't. Instead, she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. You really don't hold back, do you? He chuckled, dropping his hand. Like I said, no sense hiding who I am. They stood there a moment longer, the quiet courtyard carrying the sound of distant chatter from other students. Then Maki cleared her throat, trying to disguise the flutter in her stomach. I gotta go do some drills. Don't think this means I'm backing down or anything. Rimuru nodded, pretending not to notice the light flush that still stained her cheeks, wouldn't expect any less. She turned on her heel and strode away, pace brisk as if to outrun the confusion swirling inside her. Rimuru watched her go, feeling the warm tingle of excitement. A new bond was forming, one laced with challenge and attraction. He liked that. That evening, Rimuru found himself on a high balcony overlooking Tokyo's skyline. Jujutsu High stood on the outskirts, so the city lights glittered in the distance like an ocean of stars. He leaned on the railing, exhaling softly, thinking about the day's events. This realm bristled with energy. He'd encountered interesting people: Gojo with his infinity, Maki with her fierce resolve, Nobara's spiky attitude, Megumi's quiet watchfulness. Each one added a unique thread to the tapestry. He felt no hostility from them, just wariness and curiosity. It was refreshing not to be underestimated. In his own world, he'd been recognized as a demon lord, a godlike presence. Here, he was an anomaly, but one that commanded immediate respect. That suited him fine. A subtle prickling at the edge of his senses made him straighten. Somewhere in the night, a dark presence watched him. It was distant yet unmistakably potent, like up prey. He couldn't see it, not physically, but he felt its eyes on him. A soft breeze ruffled his hair as he let his awareness expand. For a moment, he thought he caught the faintest echo of a chuckle, mocking and ancient. Then it was gone, leaving only the night's quiet hum. A slow grin spread across his face. "King of curses," he murmured, reading the malevolence in that faint echo. "So you're out there, huh?" If that was indeed Sukuna, then perhaps Rimuru had piqued his interest. That was fine by him. He welcomed strong foes or cunning adversaries. It kept life entertaining. Footsteps approached. He turned to see Shoko walking onto the balcony, her hands in her pockets. She stopped beside him, gazing at the distant lights. "Long day?" Rimuru shrugged lightly. "Rewarding, in its way." She smiled wryly. "I heard you've been busy clearing curses, charming half the students." She glanced at him sideways. "You leave an impact wherever you go." He chuckled. "I'm not exactly trying to, but I won't deny who I am." "That's obvious." Shoko leaned against the railing, arms folded. "Take care not to stir up too much trouble. The higher-ups might tolerate you as long as you're useful, but the moment they sense a threat to their control, they'll turn on you." The sincerity in her voice made him curious. Speaking from experience? She laughed softly, a note of bitterness creeping in. "From watching Gojo's battles with them, yes. Anyone too strong draws suspicion." He could see the concern in her eyes. Though she was laid back, she did care about what happened to their world, their friends. "I appreciate the warning," he said gently. "Don't worry. I'm used to politics." She nodded, and they lapsed into companionable silence, each lost in thought. In the distance, the city's pulse continued. Oblivious to the existence of curses, sorcerers, and now a godlike slime from another world. Rimuru breathed in, feeling the swirl of forces moving around him. This was just the beginning. Something told him that the real challenges were yet to come, perhaps from Sukuna, from the cunning sorcerers who distrusted him, or even from a deeper cosmic threat that had sensed his crossing between worlds. A slow, confident smile curved his lips. "Bring it on," he thought. High above, the moon cast pale light on the balcony, enveloping them in a gentle glow. Shoko eventually left him to his thoughts, bidding him good night. Rimuru stayed a while longer, letting that sense of anticipation coil within him like a spring. Every fiber of his being was ready. This world would soon learn the extent of his power, and for once, they weren't foolish enough to underestimate him. He liked that. He liked it a lot. Later that night, he made his way back to the dorm. The corridors were quiet, most students asleep or in their rooms. Passing by one of the side wings, he paused at a faint sound, a muffled cry. Perhaps? He sharpened his senses, trying to pinpoint it. It came again, barely audible. He followed the sound to a small infirmary room. The door was partially open, lights dim. Inside, lying on a cot, was the same woman they'd rescued earlier from the alley. She must have been transferred here after the hospital checked her over. She looked restless, mumbling in her sleep, possibly still haunted by the trauma of being attacked. Rimuru stepped in quietly, kneeling by the bed. He pressed 2 fingers to her forehead again, letting a soothing wave of healing energy flow through her mind, chasing away lingering nightmares. Gradually, her face relaxed, and her breathing steadied. He stood back, satisfied. He didn't notice someone else had entered until he turned around. Nobara stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She'd been watching him for a moment, expression unreadable. "You're not supposed to be in here," she said, but her voice lacked its usual edge. Rimuru shrugged. She was distressed. Nobara studied him, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "That's kind of you." He gave a half smile. Just doing what needs to be done. She blew out a slow breath, looking away. It was as if she was trying to reconcile this gentle act with the near mythical power everyone attributed to him. You're, not all talk, are you? He tilted his head. Never claimed to be. She looked back, meeting his gaze squarely. I guess I owe you thanks, for saving that woman in the first place. And for not being a jerk about your strength. A soft chuckle escaped him. You're welcome, on both counts. She seemed hesitant, uncharacteristically so. Then, she closed the distance, her eyes fixed on his. You really don't do anything half-measure. You fight curses like it's child's play. You step in to help people you don't even know, and you don't show off or brag. Her voice grew quieter. Kind of infuriating, you know. Rimuru could sense her conflicting emotions: admiration, frustration, attraction. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Infuriating? Nobara's cheeks colored slightly. She lifted her chin stubbornly. Yeah, well, some of us had to learn the hard way, scraping by, pushing ourselves to be strong enough to handle curses. You just waltz in and do everything better. He nodded slowly. I see how that can be frustrating, but I'm not here to undermine your efforts. We're on the same side. Her eyes softened, just a bit. Then, as though she couldn't bear the tension any longer, she stood on her tiptoes and pressed a quick, impulsive kiss to his lips. It was brief and full of pent-up emotion. She pulled back immediately, looking surprised by her own action, her breath quickening. Rimuru blinked, pleasantly surprised. Well, she put a hand over her mouth, cheeks flaming. I don't get the wrong idea. I was just She threw her hands up, flustered. I'm going back to my room. Don't follow me. He couldn't hide the grin on his face. All right. Have a good night, Nobara. She gave him one last glare, though the blush on her face made it less threatening. Then she stormed out, leaving Rimuru alone with the slumbering patient. He chuckled quietly, a flicker of warmth spreading in his chest. For someone as fierce and prickly as Nobara, that moment of impulsive affection was endearing. Checking once more to ensure the patient slept peacefully, he left the infirmary and returned to his own dorm. His mind was alive with the day's events, the curses he'd annihilated, the challenges of Jujutsu High, and these unexpected but welcomed romantic sparks with Maki and Nobara. It had been a long time since he felt so thoroughly intrigued by new bonds. Back in his own world, many admired him, but the dynamic here was fresh, shaped by shared battles and the raw edge of cursed energy. He liked the challenge of earning their trust and affection, even as they recognized his overwhelming power. A confident playboy? Perhaps, but he felt it was more about genuine connection and mutual respect than mere conquest. Each woman here had her own fire, her own story. He wanted to discover all of it, not just collect them like trophies. As he shut the door to his room, he couldn't help but think of Maki's relentless ambition, Nobara's spirited pride, Shoko's grounded compassion, and even the glimpses of curiosity from others. The entire school seemed to be bracing itself for what Rimuru's presence would bring. He was bracing himself too. A sense of anticipation coiled in his gut, telling him that these days of relative calm were just the prologue to something far more intense. He fell asleep easily, drifting into a light slumber that scarcely dulled his awareness. Even in his sleep, he could sense the swirl of cursed energy in distant corners of Tokyo. And somewhere in the shadows, that malevolent gaze likely Sukuna watched, waiting for the right moment to pounce. When morning came, a subtle tension threaded through the air. It was nothing overt, but Rimuru sensed that many of the staff and students were on edge. Whisperusual curse activity ramping up in multiple districts, as though something in the city had been disturbed by Rimuru's arrival or was simply reacting to the concentrated presence of so many high-level sorcerers in one place. By midday, the rumors crystallized into reports. Entire blocks in one of the lesser-visited wards were seeing abnormal curse manifestations. Jujutsu High decided to send a sizable team to investigate, worried that the curses might be grouping up into something more dangerous. Rimuru, of course, found himself at the top of the volunteer list, with Gojo half insisting he come along. Their group gathered by the school's gates: Gojo, Megumi, Nobara, Maki, and a couple of other second-year students. Nobara offered Rimuru a curt nod, her cheeks only faintly tinged when she met his gaze. Maki eyed them with a sly curiosity but said nothing. There was an underlying sense of hurry, of readiness for a fight. Gojo greeted them with a lazy salute. All right, folks, Word is that we might have a significant cluster of curses. Possibly even a semi-special grade stirring up trouble. Let's move fast, clear them out, and keep casualties to zero. Rimuru, he turned to the slime-turned-human, we'll appreciate your help. Rimuru nodded, his tone light. Lead the way. They piled into vehicles, Gojo taking the wheel of a van with questionable driving skills, weaving through traffic at high speed. Maki, in the passenger seat, gripped the door with white knuckles, while Nobara and Megumi held on in the back. Rimuru sat calmly, unperturbed by Gojo's hair-raising maneuvers. You do realize traffic laws exist, right? Maki hissed as they narrowly avoided a taxi. Gojo laughed. We're sorcerers, Maki. We have bigger things to worry about. Nobara grumbled under her breath, if I die because of his driving, I'm haunting him. Rimuru just chuckled to himself, gazing out the window at the blur of city streets. This chaotic group was beginning to feel oddly comfortable. They reached their destination, a run-down district on the outskirts of Tokyo, where abandoned buildings stood like silent sentinels. The air was stale, tinged with rot. Rimuru could practically taste the negative emotions that had accumulated here over time: loss, despair, rage. Perfect breeding grounds for curses. Stepping out, the group fanned out, scanning their surroundings. Maki readied her cursed tools, Nobara hefted her hammer, and Megumi summoned a pair of shadowy canine shikigami that prowled protectively at his side. Gojo pushed his blindfold up, letting his sharp eyes roam. Rimuru walked among them, his mere presence sending ripples of energy through the area. Within minutes, they encountered the first wave of curses. Unlike the weaker ones in Shinjuku, these were more misshapen and vicious. Gaping mouths, twisted limbs, reeking of malice. They tore free from the walls of an old tenement, screeching at the intruders. But the sorcerers were ready. Maki sliced through one with her spear. Nobara pinned another to a crumbling support column with nails. Megumi's shikigami tackled a third, tearing it to ribbons. Rimuru held back initially, allowing them to handle the lesser threats. He admired the fluid coordination. Maki covering Nobara's flank, Megumi calling out positions. They were skilled and relentless in their own right, though he could have ended this wave in seconds. Gojo stood to the side, offering commentary like a bored sports announcer. Megumi, 3 on your left. Maki, watch the overhead. Nobara, nice hammer swing, but mind your stance. Then he glanced at Rimuru. Enjoying the show? It's fun, Rimuru said with a lazy grin, they're good. Another screech sounded from deeper inside the building. A second wave, larger, more frenzied, poured out. The students braced themselves. Rimuru raised a hand, intending to thin their numbers. But a massive curse, taller than the rest, barrel-chested and covered in mottled spines, roared to the front. Its presence was denser, more concentrated, a possible semi-special grade. It took one look at Rimuru and lunged. Maki stepped in with a shout, ready to intercept, but Rimuru motioned for her to hold. He let the curse slam its enormous fist down. The blow collided with an invisible barrier, Rimuru's version of a protective field, and shattered the creature's arm on impact. It howled, black ichor spraying. Before it could retreat, Rimuru flicked his palm upward, and the curse disintegrated, devoured by the hungry void of his energy. The remaining curses froze. Then, in a cacophony of terrified shrieks, they attempted to scatter. Maki and Nobara cut them down like scything wheat, while Megumi's shikigami cornered a cluster and finished them off. Gojo yawned theatrically. All done? He asked once the dust settled. Megumi scanned the surroundings, his expression grim. I sense more cursed energy deeper in the structure. This was just the front line. Gojo inclined his head. All right, let's keep going. Rimuru, you up for a bigger challenge? Rimuru smirked. Always. They advanced through a maze of collapsing hallways and debris-strewn rooms. Shadows flickered in corners. The stench of decay clung to every surface. Occasionally, they found twisted remnants of curses that had apparently been cannibalizing each other, a sign that something big was consolidating power here. Eventually, they reached the heart of the building, an open atrium with a caved-in roof. Sunlight streamed through gaping holes, illuminating the swirling mass of cursed energy below. A hulking figure, easily 5 times the size of an average human, rose from the center of a blackened pool. Its body bristled with spines, eyes glowing a nauseous green. It roared, the sound reverberating through the crumbling walls. That's definitely special grade territory, Nobara breathed. Maki gritted her teeth. We're dealing with something nasty here. Megumi's Shikigami growled, fur standing on end. Gojo's grin broadened. Now this is interesting. But his gaze flicked to Rimuru. What do you think, oh unstoppable one? Rimuru stepped forward, examining the curse with a thoughtful expression. Its energy is chaotic, but it's definitely strong. Let's see how far it goes. The curse lunged, entire body distorting as it unleashed a torrent of black sludge in their direction. Megumi's dogs leapt aside. Maki dodged nimbly. Nobara dove behind a broken column. Rimuru raised a hand to intercept, letting the sludge slam into an invisible barrier. It hissed and cracked, but ultimately fell away, leaving him unscathed. Gojo stayed back, letting Rimuru handle the brunt of the attack. The curse roared again, launching itself forward on powerful legs. Rimuru vanished in a blur, reappearing behind the monstrous shape. A single, clean slice of energy severed one of its arms. The curse bellowed, lashing out blindly, but Rimuru vanished again, this time tearing into its flank. Chunks of cursed flesh rained down. Wow, Nobara mumbled, wiping sweat from her brow. He's toying with it. Maki's eyes glittered with a mix of admiration and frustration. He's barely trying. The curse howled, ignoring its wounds, gathering energy in a pulsating orb at its center. Sparks of raw negativity crackled across its spines. Rimuru tensed, aware that it was about to release a concentrated blast potent enough to level the entire area. Before it could fire, he thrust out a hand. A wave of shimmering force shot forward, engulfing the curse's chest. In an instant, the orb of cursed energy was snuffed out, devoured by Rimuru's skill. The curse went rigid, shrieking in agony, as if its very essence were being consumed. With a final, echoing groan, it disintegrated into fine dust, drifting away in the shaft of sunlight. For a moment, the entire atrium fell silent. Then the echoes of the curse's demise faded, leaving only the distant creaks of the building. Megumi lowered his arms, dispelling his Shikigami. Nobara let out a breath she'd been holding. Maki drew her grip on her spear loosening. Gojo clapped slowly, the sound echoing. Bravo! That was probably the easiest special grade exorcism I've ever seen. Nobara whistled low. Remind me never to piss you off. Rimuru shook his head with a slight, self-deprecating smirk. It put up a fight, but it wasn't that bad. They took a moment to ensure there were no lingering threats. The sense of oppressive energy in the air had vanished completely, leaving only the stale odor of rot. Satisfied, they made their way back outside. It was nearly evening now, the sky a burnished orange. Leaning against the van, Gojo typed a quick message on his phone, presumably updating the higher-ups. Well, that's a wrap. Another big curse nest gone, courtesy of our unstoppable friend. Nobara rubbed the back of her neck. At least no one got hurt. That thing could have flattened a few city blocks if it escaped. Megumi's gaze fell on Rimuru. We're lucky you were here. Rimuru waved a hand dismissively. I'm just doing what I can. A few strides away, Maki stood quietly, scanning the horizon. Rimuru walked over to her, drawn by the subdued tension he saw in her posture. She gave him a sidelong glance. That was impressive, she admitted softly. He took a step closer, lowering his voice so the others wouldn't overhear. You okay? She let out a short laugh. Me? I'm fine. It's just, every time I see your power, I realize how huge the gap is. Rimuru frowned. Does it bother you that much? She looked away. I don't want to be left behind, not by anyone. I have my own goals overthrowing certain family expectations, proving my worth. Then you come along, and it's like comparing a torch to a star. He reached out, gently tracing a thumb along her jawline. Her eyes flicked back to his. You burn plenty bright, Maki. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she held his gaze. I just don't want to be overshadowed. He leaned in, pressing a soft, confident kiss to her lips. She responded, tension easing from her body. The contact was brief but charged, an affirmation of respect, attraction, and mutual recognition. When he pulled back, she exhaled, cheeks flushed. You're different from any guy I've met, she murmured. I'm not used to this. He smiled. Neither am I, but it's nice. He brushed a stray hair from her face. I want to see you keep growing, Maki. It's not about overshadowing or outshining, it's about becoming who you're meant to be. She snorted softly, a hint of color still high on her cheeks. Fine words, slime boy. He chuckled. I do my best. From the corner of his eye, he saw Nobara watching them, arms crossed, one brow raised. When she noticed him looking, she averted her gaze, pretending she hadn't been paying attention. A smirk tugged at his lips. This dynamic was definitely getting interesting. On the ride back, the mood in the van was charged yet oddly relaxed. They'd accomplished their mission, and nobody got hurt. Gojo blasted music at an obnoxious volume, occasionally singing along off-key. Megumi stared out the window, half tuned out. Nobara fiddled with her phone, occasionally sneaking glances at Rimuru. Maki sat in quiet contemplation, a slight smile playing at her lips whenever she stole a look in Rimuru's direction. Rimuru himself gazed at the passing city lights, aware that his presence here was already changing the equilibrium. The curses that had converged on that site might be just the beginning. If he continued to show this level of power, bigger players both cursed and human would likely be drawn out. He welcomed the chance to test himself, but he also recognized the danger it posed to these new allies. He rested his chin on his hand, letting the hum of the engine fill his ears. A swirl of complicated emotions settled in his chest: excitement at the challenges to come, curiosity about this realm's hidden depths, and a growing warmth whenever he thought about the fierce, determined women who'd sparked something inside him. This was the life he thrived on, always moving, always forging connections, always standing ready for the next battle. He had little doubt that the next battle would come sooner rather than later, and with it, the King of Curses himself might take a step forward. Rimuru's lips curved into a faint smile at the thought of fighting someone who might actually push him. The very possibility sent a thrill coursing through his veins. In the seat behind him, Maki's voice cut through his thoughts. Hey, Rimuru. He turned slightly to look at her. Yes? Her expression was neither playful nor flustered, now just sincere. Thanks for everything today. He nodded, feeling an unexpected warmth at her gratitude. Don't mention it. Nobara kept her eyes on her phone, but her lips tightened, as if she wanted to say something similar but couldn't bring herself to do it so openly. Megumi said nothing, but the glance he gave Rimuru spoke volumes. A quiet respect had been earned. Gojo tapped the steering wheel in time with the music, smiling as if he'd orchestrated this entire scenario just to watch how it played out. That man had a knack for stirring pots in his own mischievous way. The sun was setting by the time they approached the school. The horizon glowed pink and orange, and a sense of contentment settled over them after a job well done. Yet just as they neared the gates, Rimuru felt a tug at the edge of his consciousness, like an echo of mocking laughter that only he could hear. He frowned, focusing. Was that Sukuna's presence, or something else? It vanished almost immediately, leaving no trace. He shrugged it off for now. There would be time to investigate later. For tonight, he'd relish the small victories, establishing trust with his new allies, forging deeper bonds with Maki and Nobara, and continuing to prove that he was no one's pawn or enemy, but a force to be reckoned with. Whatever tomorrow brought, Rimuru knew he'd face it with confidence and, if need be, overwhelming power. This was only the first step in a much grander dance, and he planned to lead every step of the way. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Shifting Alliances and Deepening Shadows. A soft drizzle soaked the courtyard of Jujutsu High, casting everything in a silver sheen. Dawn light crept over the horizon, painting the wet pavement in pale ribbons. Rimuru stood near the gates, watching fine droplets bead on his jacket before sliding away. Something about the quiet hush of early morning, interrupted only by the patter of rain, set him at ease. It reminded him of home, those early hours in Tempest when the world felt impossibly still. He stretched his senses, picking up faint heartbeats and shifting auras within the compound. Students waking, staff preparing for the day's lessons, the residual sting of curses that had been slain the previous evening. He inhaled slowly, savoring the calm. After the hectic hours of exercising curses in the dilapidated district, he welcomed a moment to breathe. A voice broke the silence from behind him. Yo, up early again? He glanced over his shoulder to find Nobara approaching, a closed umbrella in hand. She wasn't bothering to shield herself from the drizzle. Droplets clung to her short hair. She wore her uniform, though her jacket was slung loosely over one shoulder, as if she'd thrown it on without thinking. Rimuru offered a slight smile. Couldn't sleep, you? She shrugged, coming to stand beside him. Same reason, I guess. Lot on my mind. They watched the rain in companionable silence. Birds fluttered across the gray sky, seeking shelter beneath the campus rooftops. Nobara tapped her fingers against the umbrella handle, restless energy in each motion. Eventually, she spoke again, voice subdued. You've changed the balance around here, you know. A lot of people are on edge and not just the higher-ups. Rimuru nodded. I expected that. Sudden power can shake any system, but they've been cordial enough. Nobara huffed IAL, sure because you haven't stepped on anyone's toes. Yet, she hesitated, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. Listen, I'm not saying I want you gone or anything. Some people don't like it when an outsider waltzes in, overshadowing them. This world's got its own rules. He turned to face her more directly. Do you think I should leave? She pursed her lips, then shook her head. No. She paused, frustration creeping into her features. Look, maybe it's selfish, but I want you to stay. You make things interesting, and, well, you saved that woman's life. You're obviously not a monster, but not everyone's convinced. Rimuru reached out, brushing a hand across her shoulder. She went still, though she didn't pull away. I'm not here to take anything from you or from anyone else. This is just where I've ended up. Her gaze dropped to his hand, and she exhaled slowly. For an instant, he thought he saw a flicker of the tender side she'd shown him in the infirmary, but she masked it quickly. I get it, she said softly. Then she looked up, eyes firm. Just promise you'll watch your back. Some folks in this world love to use strong tools, and you're basically the ultimate weapon. He lowered his hand, meeting her serious gaze. I can take care of myself. She grinned wryly. Yeah, guess that was a stupid warning. She kicked a stray pebble, sending it skidding across the slick pavement. Anyway, I'm heading to the cafeteria. If you're hungry, let's go. They walked together down the rain-soaked path, the hush of early morning still lingering between them. The cafeteria bustled with subdued chatter by the time they arrived. The overhead lights cast a bright glow on rows of tables and a small buffet counter. Students in dark uniforms formed short lines for breakfast trays. Rimuru grabbed a simple meal: rice, grilled fish, miso soup, and followed Nobara to a corner table. Maki was already there, arms folded on the tabletop, a barely touched bowl of cereal in front of her. She glanced up at their approach. You two are up early. Nobara plopped down, setting her tray with a dull thud. Tell me about it. Rain woke me up. Maki's gaze flicked to Rimuru. You look like you hardly slept. He offered a small shrug. I'm fine. They ate quietly for a time. The cafeteria filled steadily. Megumi arrived with Toge and Panda, exchanging greetings as they found seats elsewhere. A few second-year students took a table by the window. Occasionally, curious glances flickered in Rimuru's direction, but nobody approached. At one point, Maki broke the silence. I heard from Shoko that the woman you rescued is recovering well. She woke up last night, apparently. Doesn't remember much, but she's alive because of you. Rimuru nodded, sipping his soup. That's good to hear. Nobara eyed Maki, then Rimuru. A flash of some emotion crossed her face, maybe a pang of envy or confusion. She swallowed and returned to her food without comment. After breakfast, they dispersed. Nobara headed to a training session with a senior sorcerer, while Maki mentioned her own schedule. Rimuru lingered behind, finishing his meal in contented silence. A faint prickle of awareness ran down his spine, though like he was being watched. He glanced around the cafeteria and spotted a tall, lean figure leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, cloak draped over his shoulders. The man's face was partially obscured by the hood, but Rimuru felt the scrutinizing stare. The moment Rimuru's eyes met that shadowed gaze, the hooded figure turned and slipped away. The entire exchange lasted only a few seconds. Rimuru frowned. This presence felt different from the everyday wariness he'd noticed among the other students. It was hostile. He finished his meal, resolved to remain alert. Outside, the rain began to taper off. Bright patches of sky broke through the gray clouds. Rimuru strolled through the courtyard, letting the moisture evaporate from his hair in the warming air. The energy in the area was shifting. He could sense subtle, intangible pulses of cursed energy. Not the immediate threat of an attack, but a hum of tension that made the corners of the campus feel heavier. He decided to wander, to see if he might catch any whiff of that unknown hostility or find the figure who had been watching him. As he turned a corner by the archery range, he sensed a surge of spiritual aura. 2 steps more, and he spotted a cluster of second-year students gathered in a ring around something or someone. They parted slightly, revealing the tall, hooded figure from before. His hood was pushed back, revealing strong, angular features and vivid red hair pulled into a short ponytail at the nape of his neck. He wore a black undershirt with half gloves covering his forearms, and his eyes shone with a fierce, unsettled energy. Opposite him stood Toge Inumaki, short sleeves revealing the cursed speech markings on his skin. Toge's brow was furrowed, his stance coiled as if ready for a fight. The tension crackled between them. Rimuru stepped closer, overhearing snippets of conversation. "Not your business," the hooded man hissed, voice low and dripping with contempt. "I'm here to see the one they call Rimuru Tempest. Stop wasting my time." Toge's lips parted, but he caught himself too many words, and the cursed speech would activate. He settled for glaring daggers at the intruder. Maki appeared from somewhere behind the crowd. She shouldered past 2 onlookers, eyes narrowed. "What's going on here?" Several students started talking at once, but the gist was clear. The red-haired stranger had walked onto campus unannounced, demanding to see Rimuru. When Toge tried to intercept, the man unleashed enough cursed energy to show he wasn't there for a friendly chat. Rimuru stepped through the ring of onlookers. The moment he emerged, the stranger's gaze locked onto him with an intensity that practically sparked in the air. "Rimuru Tempest," he said, rolling the name on his tongue like a challenge. "I'm Tenma Yasuo, a sorcerer aligned with certain, concerned parties." Maki moved to Rimuru's side, tension clear in her posture. "Who sent you?" Tenma ignored her question, focusing solely on Rimuru. "I've come to test you. Word is you're unbelievably strong. The big guns might be fooled, but I need to see for myself if you're friend or foe." Rimuru's expression remained calm. He picked up on the swirl of negativity beneath Tenma's words: resentment, maybe anger or fear. "I'm not looking to fight you, but if you threaten the school, I won't stand by." Tenma's eyes glinted. "So you'll stand your ground, then? Good. I hate cowards." He lunged without warning, hand igniting with cursed energy. The crowd gasped and scattered. Toge moved to intervene, but Rimuru shook his head, stepping forward smoothly. In an instant, Tenma's palm swung toward Rimuru's chest, trailing violet sparks. Rimuru lifted a single finger and blocked the strike effortlessly, cursed energy crackling off his skin without leaving a mark. Tenma's pupils shrank. He pulled back, flipping through a quick series of hand signs that conjured swirling motes of light around him. They crystallized into spear-like projectiles, each humming with condensed power. He launched them at Rimuru in rapid succession, but Rimuru merely raised his hand, parted his fingers, and each spear dissolved into glittering fragments before it even made contact. A hush fell over the courtyard. Students stared wide-eyed. Even Maki's expression shifted from concern to grudging admiration. Tenma snarled, pressing a hand to the ground. Dark tendrils of cursed energy snaked across the grass, forming a wide seal. The temperature seemed to drop by several degrees as the technique took shape. A faint, swirling barrier began to rise, reminiscent of a small domain though incomplete. Rimuru recognized the attempt at once. Tenma was creating a rudimentary domain-like space to toss a custom technique that tried to mimic domain expansion without fully achieving it. The air shimmered around them, and the observers on the perimeter drew back in alarm. With a sense of mild curiosity, Rimuru reached out mentally, letting his analysis skill pick apart the barrier's structure. It felt tenuous, nowhere near the stability of a true domain expansion. Still, it had real power behind it, enough to trap or even injure an ordinary sorcerer. Tenma's breath came fast and harsh. "Let's see how invincible you are, Rimuru Tempest." In a single decisive motion, Rimuru pressed his palm against the barrier's boundary. A ripple of azure energy surged outward, unraveling Tenma's formation like a loose thread. The swirling cursed energy vanished in an instant, leaving no trace. Tenma stood there, panting, shock etched on his face. Rimuru lowered his hand. "Are you done?" Tenma seethed, stepping back. Despite his fury, he managed to hold Rimuru's gaze. "You really are as strong as they said." A flash of movement caught Rimuru's eye. Maki had stepped closer, her spear drawn. Her posture signaled that she was ready to step in if Tenma tried anything else. The surrounding students seemed torn between fear and fascination. Tenma glared at Maki, then at Toge, who was holding his cursed speech in check, eyes narrowed with readiness. Finally, Tenma exhaled and let his hands fall to his sides. You're going to upset the balance in this world, Rimuru. Some of us won't let that happen without a fight. Rimuru regarded him evenly. I don't plan on destroying anything here. But if people keep forcing my hand, he left the statement hanging, letting the edge in his tone speak for itself. Tenma spat on the ground, wiping sweat from his brow. I'll relay what I've seen. Don't think this is over. With that, he turned on his heel and strode toward the gates. A hush remained in his wake. No one tried to stop him. Maki lowered her weapon, frustration evident in her tight jaw. We can't just let him walk away, can we? Rimuru placed a calming hand on her shoulder. He's not a curse. He's a sorcerer. He didn't kill anyone, though he definitely meant business. If there's a bigger plot, we'll find out soon enough. The cluster of onlookers began to disperse, buzzing with conversation about what they'd just witnessed. Toge approached, giving Rimuru a quick thumbs up. Rimuru nodded, recognizing Toge's silent thank you for preventing a larger clash. A light drizzle returned, rapping softly on the courtyard flagstones. In that moment, Rimuru felt the first real pang of concern. This confrontation had been minor, but it signaled a larger undercurrent. There were indeed sorcerers out there who saw him as a threat. If Tenma was just a scout or messenger, stronger opponents might soon follow. He offered Maki a reassuring look. Let's go find Gojo. We need to let him know what happened. She agreed with a curt nod, slipping her spear onto her back. They headed off together, the faint stares of lingering students trailing after them. They found Gojo in the administration building, casually leaning back in a wooden chair with his feet propped on a desk. Beside him stood Shoko, arms folded, observing the corridor outside. Whatever conversation they'd been having stalled the moment Rimuru and Maki appeared. Gojo sat up. You two look like you've been in a storm or about to start one. Maki wasted no time. A sorcerer named Tenma Yasuo just showed up on campus, challenged Rimuru. He practically tried to kill him. Shoko's expression sharpened. He came inside the school's walls? Rimuru nodded. Yes. He said he's aligned with concerned parties. I'm guessing that means certain higher-ups are an offshoot faction who see me as a threat. Gojo's usual playful demeanor hardened a fraction. Tenma Yasuo, huh? I've heard the name. He used to be part of a specialized group that monitors high-level cursed threats around Japan. They're not official Jujutsu high staff, but they get funding and resources from certain families. The fact that he was bold enough to walk in here is concerning. Maki glanced at Shoko. He tried a partial domain. Rimuru dismantled it like it was nothing. Shoko's gaze flicked to Rimuru. You're not hurt? Rimuru shook his head. Gojo sighed, pulling down his blindfold and pinching the bridge of his nose. I'll inform the top brass. Knowing them, they'll hem and haw about rogue operatives, and how they never authorized an attack. But in reality, it means that at least one major faction wants to gauge or eliminate Rimuru. Let them come, Rimuru said softly, though his tone carried a certain finality. I have no intention of being anyone's pawn. Gojo studied him for a moment. Then, a slow grin returned to his face. And that's exactly why you scare them. Good. Let's keep them on their toes. Shoko exhaled, as if trying to dispel the tension. I'll spread the word for everyone to stay alert. But you'll need to be careful, Rimuru. If Tenma is just the start, we might see more direct moves soon. He nodded. Understood. Maki turned to go, her thoughts clearly churning. She paused at the door, hesitating as though she wanted to say something else, but then she left without a word. Rimuru lingered behind. Gojo crossed his arms, regarding him with an air of mischief. So, how'd you handle Tenma? Calmly. I let him try his attacks, then I neutralized them. I didn't want to kill him. Gojo nodded approvingly. Good. That's what I would have done. Now we see if he or his sponsors escalate. Shoko cleared her throat. We should also keep an eye on how this is affecting the students. Some of them might get the idea to test Rimuru too, out of curiosity or misguided ambition. Rimuru's expression softened. I'll handle it. I'm not here to be anyone's punching bag, but I don't want to cause unnecessary violence. Gojo slid his feet off the desk and stood, patting Rimuru on the shoulder as he passed. That's the spirit. Let me know if you need anything or if you want me to show you some of Tokyo's nightlife. Might as well enjoy yourself while you're here, right? Rimuru chuckled. I'll keep that in mind. Shoko gave a faint smile. Just don't drag him into one of your bizarre bar crawls, Gojo. I still remember cleaning up after the last time. Gojo waved off the comment, sauntering out the door. Shoko rolled her eyes and followed, leaving Rimuru alone in the office. He stood there, absorbing the weight of what had just transpired. Tenma's arrival was more than a simple challenge. It was a signal flare. The serenity of Jujutsu High might soon be shattered if other factions joined in. Briefly, he thought of Sukuna's presence, that lurking malice he'd felt at times. Between sorcerers like Tenma and the King of Curses waiting in the wings, the stage felt set for a grand confrontation. Part of Rimuru welcomed it. He'd never been one to shy away from a challenge, but he also recognized that every clash would affect the people around him. He left the office, resolved to keep a level head, and decided to check on the daily training sessions. With luck, he might find Maki, Nobara, or Megumi, and see how they were handling the sudden tension. The training ground sat behind the main building, shielded on two sides by tall hedges. A few straw dummies stood in a line, while wooden practice swords rested on racks. The afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, drying the grass that still glimmered faintly from the morning rain. Nobara was there, hammer in hand, practicing a new technique. She thrust nails into the dummy with a practiced flick, each impact punctuated by a sharp ring of metal. Megumi stood nearby, arms folded, occasionally offering pointers. When Rimuru arrived, they looked up. Nobara's gaze found his, and for a split second, her expression softened. Then she put on a tough facade. So I heard you, Hamaker. Megumi arched a brow. That was fast, even for this school. Rimuru approached, stopping at a comfortable distance. He called himself Tenma Yasuo. Possibly aligned with conservative factions who see me as a threat. I diffused the situation as gently as possible. Megumi made a thoughtful sound. That name rings a bell. I recall my father mentioning a Yasuo clan once, something about specialized trackers for high-level curses. If they're targeting you, it means they think you're in the same category as special-grade threats. Nobara set her hammer on her shoulder. Fantastic. Now we have official weirdos on top of everything else. She gestured to Rimuru with the hammer's handle. You all right, though? He gave a reassuring nod. He couldn't do much, not to sound arrogant, but I had the advantage. She sighed, a mix of relief and exasperation. Of course you did. Then she returned to her practice swings, though the tension in her stance hinted she was still rattled by the news. Megumi's dogs appeared from his shadows, sniffing the grass around him. He patted one absent-mindedly. I suppose if Tenma returns with allies, we'll be dealing with a group of skilled sorcerers. If that happens, the school won't be so calm. Rimuru nodded. I'll do what I can to stop them before they cause harm. Nobara paused mid-swing, nails pinched between her fingers. She glanced at Rimuru. You know, you don't have to bear all this alone. We're sorcerers too. He offered a faint smile. I appreciate that. But my power is the reason they're here. I'll stand in front if needed, protect what needs protecting. She rolled her eyes, though her cheeks tinted slightly. What a hero. Rimuru just smirked, stepping away to watch her technique. She lined up another nail on the dummy, powering it with cursed energy. The moment she drove the nail forward, the dummy's torso splintered. A second later, the nail embedded itself in a wooden post behind the dummy. The residual force cracked the post in half. He let out a low whistle. Your control's improving. She hid her pleasure behind a casual shrug. You should see what I can do when I'm fully warmed up. Before he could reply, Maki arrived, out of breath. Rimuru, I was looking for you. There's a meeting in one of the smaller auditoriums. The higher-ups want us there. You too, Nobara, Megumi. Megumi glanced at the sky. Now? That's sudden. Apparently, word of Tenma's visit traveled fast, Maki said. She flicked a look at Rimuru. They want full disclosure on the incident. Probably also want to address the tensions building. Nobara looked irritated, but she tossed her hammer aside and headed for the exit. Megumi followed, the dogs vanishing into swirling shadows. Maki lingered at Rimuru's side, scanning his face. You good? She asked quietly. He offered a brief, warm smile. Always. Let's see what they have to say. They walked together, side by side, heading toward the auditorium. The campus was alive with murmurs and speculation, as though the entire student body sensed the gathering storm. In the auditorium, rows of folding chairs faced a simple podium on a raised platform. About 30 people gathered: students, faculty, and a few older sorcerers who oversaw administrative decisions. Rimuru spotted some stern faces among them, likely the same elders who'd questioned him on arrival. Gojo leaned casually against a side wall, arms crossed. Shoko stood near him, her expression difficult to read. A senior staff member with graying hair and a crisp uniform stepped up to the podium. She didn't introduce herself. Instead, she cut straight to the point. We are here to discuss the sudden appearance of Tenma Yasuo at our institution, his confrontation with Rimuru Tempest, and the broader implications of such an incident. Given the tensions surrounding Rimuru's arrival and the potential unknown factors at play, we felt this meeting was necessary. Will those directly involved please step forward and give their account? Rimuru felt dozens of eyes turn his way. He walked up the aisle, Maki and Toge right behind him, since they'd been on the scene. Toge offered a silent nod in support. Facing the podium, Rimuru recounted the exchange in clipped detail. He described Tenma's aggressive demands, the partial domain, and the lack of serious harm aside from property damage. Maki confirmed the story. Toge added a brief statement in his limited speech form: salmon, danger. It made little sense to outsiders, but the staff knew Toge's gist. Tenma was indeed dangerous. One of the elders adjusted his glasses, eyes flicking to Rimuru. You claim Tenma used a domain-like technique? Rimuru nodded. Incomplete, but yes. I recognized it as a possible half-formed domain expansion. A buzz spread through the audience. That level of skill meant Tenma wasn't just a small fry. Another elder spoke, a wiry man with deep creases in his forehead. This is troubling. We've had reports that certain conservative factions disapprove of your presence, Rimuru. They view you as a potential threat to the stability of our world. Tenma may have been acting under their orders to gauge your power. Rimuru crossed his arms. Then I hope this demonstration satisfies them. I won't be manipulated. A murmur of agreement flowed through the students. Some of the elders exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. Finally, the woman at the podium cleared her throat. We will increase security measures and attempt to mediate with any outside faction that tries to disrupt our school. In the meantime, we expect all students and staff to remain vigilant. Rimuru, you are free to stay, but be aware you are now a target. He inclined his head. I appreciate the clarification. The woman's gaze flicked across the room. That's all for now. Any questions? A slender hand rose from a row near the back. Rimuru recognized the voice even before he saw her face. Utahime Iori, a faculty member from the Kyoto branch. She stood, formal and poised. Has there been any official statement from the Yasuo family or their affiliates denying or confirming Tenma's actions? The elder at the podium shook her head. None yet. We've sent inquiries. Utahime sat back, looking concerned. Understood. The meeting ended shortly after, with staff and students dispersing in uneasy groups. Maki lingered at Rimuru's side, scanning the thinning crowd. It's never simple here, is it? He gave a half smile. I wouldn't know, but I'm guessing no. Nobara caught up to them, tucking stray hairs behind her ear. So that was basically a big, fancy, be careful, speech, right? Maki nodded. Pretty much. The only plus side is that it's out in the open now. If Tenma or his cronies come back, we have official backing to push back. Nobara eyed Rimuru. Think they'll try again soon? He considered it. If Tenma's pride is hurt, maybe. But I suspect they'll gather information first. It might be quiet for a while. She sighed. Quiet's boring. Yet there was a flicker of nervous tension in her eyes. Maki rolled her shoulders, as if shedding the auditorium's oppressive atmosphere. I'm going to the dojo to work off some steam. You guys coming? Nobara snorted. You training addicts. I'll pass for now. I need a break, maybe a nap. Rimuru studied Maki's determined expression, the hint of frustration from the day's events swirling beneath her calm exterior. I'll join you, he said softly. She nodded, and together they left, footsteps echoing in the dim corridors. The dojo was quiet, its polished wooden floor gleaming under overhead lanterns. Maki fetched a pair of practice spears from a nearby rack, handing one to Rimuru. He accepted it, twirling it experimentally. She raised an eyebrow. You can use a spear too. He smiled. I've had some practice with various weapons. They squared off, the atmosphere immediate anticipation. Maki's gaze sharpened, her stance firm. When she moved, she did so with lethal grace, each thrust and sweep of her spear honed by years of relentless training. Rimuru matched her fluidity, deflecting strikes with minimal effort, though he kept his own power carefully dialed back. The wooden shafts clacked, echoing across the dojo. Maki pressed forward, testing angles and speed, sweat glistening on her forehead. Rimuru met each challenge, stepping neatly aside when she lunged, sliding his spear to intercept her next blow. Her breathing grew heavier as she amped up the intensity. A spin, followed by a downward strike aimed at his shoulder, forced him to shift stance. He parried the blow and let the momentum carry him into a light riposte that tapped her side. She hissed in frustration, pivoting away, then lunging again. He slid beneath her spear, catching her off guard and tapping her calf lightly in a mock strike. She stumbled but didn't fall, turning the misstep into a swift, upward thrust that nearly grazed his ribs. A grin tugged at his lips. Nice recovery. She didn't respond, focused entirely on the next move. Her eyes burned with determination that bordered on obsession, like she was fighting more than just a sparring partner. With a small flare of cursed energy, she bolstered her movements, slamming the spear down. Rimuru blocked, the impact resonating through his arms. He sensed the fury behind that blow, frustration at Tenma, at the conservative factions, maybe even frustration at him for making her feel overshadowed. He twisted his wrists, disarming her by locking the spear's tip and twisting sharply. Her weapon clattered to the floor. Gasping, Maki stood there, tension thrumming in every line of her body. Rimuru lowered his spear, stepping closer. You're pushing yourself. She frowned, wiping sweat from her temple. So what if I am? He set his spear aside. It's fine to push, but maybe talk to me. She scowled, dropping her gaze. I don't need pity. Sometimes I feel like no matter how much I train, I'll never catch up to you, or Gojo, or any of these freakishly strong people. And now Tenma waltzes in, probably sees me as an afterthought while he aims for you. Rimuru reached out, cupping her cheek gently. She stiffened but didn't pull away, eyes locked on his. Your strength isn't measured by how you compare to me or Gojo. You've already proven how capable you are. Don't let someone else's power define you. Her shoulders trembled slightly, the raw edge of her frustration surfacing. I know that logically, but it's hard. I've been fighting an uphill battle my entire life. I just don't want to be left behind again. He slid his hand to the back of her neck, drawing her closer. She didn't resist, leaning into him with a quiet exhale that carried more vulnerability than she usually showed. For a moment, the dojo seemed to vanish around them, the world reduced to the sound of their breathing, the press of their bodies. He tilted his head, brushing his lips over hers in a soft, lingering kiss. She responded, arms coming up to circle his waist, fingers tightening in his shirt. The kiss spoke of pent-up tension, relief, and a spark of defiance against every challenge she faced. When they parted, she took a shaky breath, her face flushed. You sure don't hold back, she murmured, echoing the words she'd once said. He smiled, thumb stroking across her cheekbone. I meant every word. You're strong, Maki, and not just in raw power. Remember that. Her eyes shone with emotion before she blinked it away. She stepped back, running a hand through her hair. Thanks, she said, voice a bit husky. Then she cleared her throat and retrieved her fallen spear. We should probably cool down before we overheat. Rimuru grinned, picking up the other spear. Agreed. Let's do a few more light passes. They resumed their training, this time at a gentler pace. The tension had eased, replaced by a warm undercurrent of understanding that pulsed between them. Later, Maki headed off to shower, and Rimuru found himself alone on the dojo's wooden deck, letting the breeze dry his sweat. He stared out at the courtyard, the afternoon sun now blazing in full. Students bustled about, hurrying between buildings, exchanging news about missions and classes. He sensed a familiar presence approaching and turned to see Shoko stepping onto the deck. She carried a small first aid kit in one hand, the strap draped loosely around her wrist. Saw you two sparring. Thought you might get hurt. He chuckled. We were careful. She set the kit down, crossing her arms. Careful is relative, given your power. No injuries, then? None. Thanks for checking. She nodded. A comfortable silence settled for a moment, Shoko's gaze drifting across the courtyard. How are you handling all this? Another attacker, the meeting, the stairs. Rimuru exhaled slowly. I'm used to being a lightning rod for challenges, but seeing how it affects everyone else, that's harder. Her eyes flicked to him, sympathy apparent. You're not responsible for their fears. You didn't ask to be dropped in this world. Maybe not, but it's on me to decide how I handle it. She gave a small, understanding smile. Then, somewhat hesitantly, she stepped closer, lifting a hand to touch his shoulder. You don't have to do it alone. We might not be as strong as you, but we do care about what happens. He felt a sudden surge of warmth at her words. With Maki and Nobara, the energy was often electric, driven by challenge and raw emotion. But Shoko had a quieter strength, a steady calm that soothed rather than provoked. He found himself lightly brushing a strand of her hair aside. I appreciate you looking out for me. She tilted her head, a hint of amusement in her eyes. Don't mistake my concern for fussiness. I'm just being practical. If you get yourself killed or messed up, we lose our biggest trump card. He laughed softly. Understood. A slight flush crept along her cheeks. She dropped her hand. Anyway, I should go. Patients to check on, files to update. Impulsively, he leaned in, pressing a light, lingering kiss to her temple. She stiffened momentarily, then relaxed, a small, breathy laugh escaping her. You're bold, aren't you? He gave a gentle shrug. Life's too short to hesitate. She lingered for another second, searching his eyes. Then, with a faint smile, she turned and walked away, her white coat fluttering behind her. Rimuru let out a long breath, surprised at how naturally these connections were forming. Each dynamic was distinct: Maki's fiery ambition, Nobara's prickly vulnerability, Shoko's grounded warmth. He respected them all. Perhaps that was why they gravitated to him, beyond mere power. As he stood there, letting the moment settle, he felt another flicker of that distant malice, like the faint beat of a drum in the darkness. Sukuna, or something akin to him. A reminder that not everything in this world would be so gentle. Evening brought a subtle hush over the campus. Classes ended, students filtered back to their dorms, and the staff prepared for another night of potential missions. Rimuru retreated to his room, planning to rest and reflect on the day's events. Yet as soon as he entered, he felt a familiar pressure brushing against his consciousness. Rimuru Tempest, came a voice like dark silk, echoing in his mind. He stiffened. Sukuna, he whispered. For a moment, he thought the cursed spirit might appear physically, but instead, he heard laughter reverberate in his head. The presence felt closer than before, as if Sukuna was pushing the boundaries of Yuji's vessel to reach out telepathically. I've been watching you. Sukuna's voice purred. You're far more entertaining than the usual fodder. Perhaps it's time we had a real conversation. Rimuru scanned the shadows of the room. And what would we talk about? A low chuckle rumbled in the silence. You have so much of it, yet you waste it playing nice with those sorcerers. Are you truly content to sit under the watch of Gojo and his pitiful seniors? Rimuru's mouth tightened. I don't answer to them, but I don't share your cruelty, either. Oh, come now. You don't strike me as naive. You must sense the darkness in this world, how fear and violence shape every corner. We're not so different, you and I. Rimuru's eyes narrowed. We're nothing alike. Sukuna's mock sigh echoed. Such bravado. Don't worry, sooner or later, we'll clash. Whether you like it or not, you're the only one who might give me a thrill. I look forward to tasting your power. The presence began to recede, leaving behind a faint sense of malevolence. Rimuru clenched his fists. I won't hold back if you push me, Sukuna, he muttered, half to himself. A final laugh flitted through his mind, then faded completely. The room fell silent. He leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly, trying to steady the pulse of adrenaline that came from Sukuna's near contact. It seemed everything was converging. Tenma's faction stirring the pot, Sukuna's interest growing. The question was which thread would boil over first. That night, Rimuru didn't sleep much. He rose before dawn, deciding to clear his head with a walk through the campus grounds. The sky was still dark, only a hint of purple on the eastern horizon. His footsteps sounded unnaturally loud on the stone paths. He paused by a tall cherry tree at the edge of the courtyard, one he often gravitated to. The petals had mostly fallen by this season, leaving sparse pink blossoms among green leaves. In the pale light, they looked ghostly, almost ethereal. A rustle behind him made him turn. Maki stood there in casual clothes, her hair tousled. She looked surprised to see him, then relaxed. "You can't sleep either?" He shook his head. "Too many thoughts." She nodded, stuffing her hands into her jacket pockets. "Same here. Mind if I join you?" "Please." They stood side by side beneath the tree. A soft breeze carried the scent of damp earth, drifting over the stone courtyard walls. Maki drew in a deep breath, as if savoring the quiet. After a while, she broke the silence. "I've been thinking about Tenma, about your words, about everything. It just frustrates me. How easily some people claim the right to decide who's a threat and who isn't, all based on fear or ignorance." He tilted his head, looking at her profile. "You've been on the receiving end of that before?" She shrugged, jaw tightening. "The Zenin clan had plenty of reasons to treat me like an outcast. When you don't fit their idea of strength or tradition, they label you defective." He watched her carefully. "But you found your own path, your own strength." She smiled ruefully. "Yes, though it took every ounce of willpower I had. Now, seeing you face similar prejudice for different reasons, sure, but still a prejudice, it brings back memories. I don't want you forced out just because you scare them." His heart stirred at the sincerity in her words. "I'm not leaving, unless they physically drag me out, and that wouldn't be easy for them." She chuckled. "Understatement." He brushed a hand over hers, fingers lightly tracing her knuckles. "You don't have to worry. If they come for me, I'll handle it, and I won't let them hurt you, or Nobara, or anyone else." Her cheeks colored faintly in the moonlight. She squeezed his hand in return. "Just don't forget we can fight beside you." They fell into a hushed stillness, the distant city lights flickering beyond the school walls. Then Maki leaned her head on his shoulder, letting out a soft exhale. For a woman so strong and guarded, it was a vulnerable gesture. Rimuru welcomed it, resting his cheek against her hair. When the sky lightened with dawn's approach, they parted silently, exchanging a look that spoke more than words. A promise of unity, perhaps, in the face of whatever storms lay ahead. Morning classes proceeded in an almost normal fashion, though the undercurrent of tension remained. Rimuru wandered through the corridors, occasionally stopping to watch a lesson or practice session. Students still stole curious glances at him. Some looked impressed, others cautious. He found himself in a corridor near the library, scanning the spines of old tomes through the glass window of a locked cabinet. Many books contained archaic knowledge of curses and sorcery, a labyrinth of secrets. He reached out, fingertips brushing the cool glass, when footsteps approached from behind. He turned, expecting one of the students or staff, but instead found an unfamiliar man, older than most there. Tall, lean, with steel-gray hair slicked back. He wore a crisp suit, a small identification badge pinned to the lapel, a sign he was authorized to be on campus. "Rimuru Tempest, I presume," the man said, voice smooth, polite. Rimuru nodded. "That's me. And you are?" "Just an observer." He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I've been sent by certain influential figures to assess the environment here. You're quite the talk of the town." Rimuru arched an eyebrow. "Influential figures? Does that include Tenma Yasuo's sponsors?" The man shrugged. "Perhaps. My job is to ensure stability. If your presence disrupts that, I'm obligated to report it." Rimuru's gaze hardened. "Is there a point to this conversation, or are you just here to rattle me?" "Merely stating facts. You're powerful, unprecedented, some say, and that is inherently dangerous." He glanced at the library doors. "Knowledge can be just as dangerous, if misused. Think carefully about the lines you cross. We wouldn't want a misunderstanding." Rimuru studied him for a moment, the man's composure too controlled, too measured. "If your sponsors are planning something, you can tell them I'm not leaving." The man gave a thin smile. "I'm sure they'll be interested in that response. Have a pleasant day, Mr. Tempest." He walked away with a measured gait, leaving Rimuru standing there, jaw tight. The conversation was brief but brimming with insinuations, a polite threat from the shadows. The door to the library opened behind him, and Nobara stepped out, carrying a stack of books. She frowned, noticing his expression. "Something wrong?" He shook his head. Nothing I can't handle, just more of the same. She let out a frustrated sigh. Great. If they keep poking you like this, eventually they'll get a reaction. Rimuru forced a wry smile. They might be counting on it. She held his gaze. Well, don't let them bait you into something stupid. We need you here, not thrown into some outside war. He exhaled, tension easing slightly at her concern. I'll try to keep calm, but if they cross a line, I won't hold back. She nodded. Just make sure we're around so we can help. He gave her a small, genuine smile. Count on it. Afternoon sun streamed into the school's central courtyard. Rimuru found a quiet spot on a bench beneath a maple tree, the leaves casting dappled shadows. He welcomed the chance to think, to let the swirl of half-threats and alliances settle. Before long, Megumi appeared, sliding his hands into his pockets. He didn't sit, just stood nearby, posture relaxed yet alert. I heard about that strange man in the corridor, he said. Sounds like another warning. Rimuru nodded. They're relentless. Guess they really are afraid of me. Megumi studied him. Fear can make people reckless. I've seen it. They'll keep pushing until they either force you out or provoke you into a fight. Then they can label you as the enemy. Rimuru tapped a foot against the ground, brow furrowed. I won't give them an easy excuse, but if they attack the school or the students, I won't just stand by. Megumi's expression was unreadable. After a moment, he said quietly, Good. We might be strong, but even we can be strategies or sheer numbers. Having you on our side is reassuring, especially if worse threats surface. Like Sukuna, Rimuru said softly. Megumi's jaw tightened. Yes. Yuji's doing his best to keep Sukuna suppressed, but that cursed spirit grows restless. I can sense it. Rimuru glanced up at the shifting leaves. He's been reaching out to me, taunting me. I feel it too. Megumi's eyes widened slightly. He can communicate with you? In a way. A mental link, or perhaps just a broadcast of cursed energy. He wants to fight. Megumi let out a slow breath. Figures. Sukuna's always hungry for conflict, especially if it involves someone who might challenge him. Then eventually, he'll try to break free, Rimuru murmured. I just hope I'm ready. Megumi gave him a measured look. You seem more than ready, but Sukuna's cunning. Don't underestimate him. I won't, Rimuru said. A silence settled between them. It was the silence of two warriors acknowledging that battle was coming, that the peace they enjoyed might be fleeting. Megumi finally gave a short nod and walked off, leaving Rimuru with his thoughts. That evening, the sky darkened with heavy clouds, threatening another downpour. A staff member knocked on Rimuru's door, asking him to report to the main building for a briefing. He arrived to find Gojo, Shoko, and a few other upper-level sorcerers gathered around a table strewn with maps of Tokyo. Gojo beckoned Rimuru over. We've got a situation downtown, near Roppongi. Several eyewitness reports of high-level curses manifesting in a construction zone. Usually, we'd send a team of first-grade sorcerers, but with the tensions lately, we want to handle it decisively. That's why I want you in on this. One of the older sorcerers cleared his throat. We've also received reports that Tenma Yasuo might be operating in that area. Possibly he's trying to subdue or capture these curses to use them as leverage. It's speculation, but we can't ignore it. Rimuru scanned the map, picking out a large construction site near a cluster of skyscrapers. So we go in, eradicate any curses, and see if Tenma shows up. Gojo nodded. Exactly. The job might be straightforward, or it could be a trap. You up for it? Rimuru's lips quirked in a half-smile, of course. Shoko tapped the map lightly. Be careful. The construction site is massive, multiple levels, scaffolding, underground tunnels. Curses love confined spaces. You might have to split up to cover everything. Gojo clapped his hands. We move out in 30 minutes. We'll take Megumi, Nobara, and a few other students as backup. I'll come too, for crowd control if any civilians wander in. Let's try not to blow up half the city, okay? Rimuru glanced at him. I'll keep it contained. Despite the tension, Gojo flashed a playful grin. That's what I like to hear. They finalized the plan quickly. Nobara, Megumi, and 2 second-year students would handle the perimeter, ensuring no curses slipped past. Gojo and Rimuru would dive into the heart of the construction zone, dealing with the core threat. If Tenma or any other hostile sorcerers appeared, they'd adapt on the fly. Night settled heavily over Tokyo as they reached the site. Towering cranes loomed above half-built skyscrapers. Floodlights illuminated steel beams and exposed concrete. Rain drizzled again, turning the ground into muddy pools and slick walkways. Nobara and Megumi split off, each leading a small team around the perimeter. Meanwhile, Gojo and Rimuru walked side by side into the site's central area, alert to every flicker of cursed energy. A guttural snarl echoed from somewhere between the scaffolds. Gojo halted, tilting his head. "Hear that?" Rimuru nodded, eyes narrowing. "Curses. Several, not quite special grade, but strong." They moved quickly, weaving past hanging tarps and stacks of construction materials. The darkness swallowed them, broken only by the glare of distant floodlights. Then a shape lunged from behind a steel support column, twisted, humanoid, reeking of malevolence. It swiped clawed hands at Gojo, only to be repelled by his infinity. Rimuru swung a casual backhand of energy, ripping the creature apart in midair. Its shriek choked off as it dissolved into black sludge. Another hiss sounded, and a second curse leapt from a higher platform. Rimuru flicked a glance upward, but Gojo hopped back with a laugh, snapping his fingers. The curse froze in the air, then imploded under the pressure of Gojo's technique. They advanced deeper, encountering more curses along the way. Some were dog-like, slithering across beams, while others crawled on spider limbs. None posed any real challenge to the duo. Rimuru and Gojo dispatched them with ease, pressing forward to find the nest. At one point, Rimuru paused, sensing a heavier concentration of cursed energy beneath the main foundation. He motioned to Gojo. "Down there." Gojo nodded, heading toward a large opening in the concrete floor that led to an underground parking structure. The darkness below felt alive, thick with spiritual miasma. The moment they descended the ramp, a towering curse materialized, a hulking form stitched together from dozens of smaller entities, its face a contorted mass of teeth. It roared, lunging with surprising speed. Gojo slid aside, letting infinity stop the curse's enormous claw. Rimuru unleashed a precise spike of energy, piercing its torso from chest to spine. Instead of dying, the curse split apart, each chunk reforming into smaller curses that scattered into the shadows. Gojo whistled. "Nasty." Rimuru nodded. "They're fusing and separating. If we keep slicing them apart, they'll just scatter." Gojo adjusted his blindfold. Time for something bigger, then. He lifted a hand, cursed energy swirling around him in a brilliant, sky-blue haze. Before he could unleash it, Rimuru placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let me," Rimuru said, stepping forward. Gojo's grin broadened. "By all means." Rimuru extended both arms, focusing on the fragments of curses slithering away in the darkness. His senses locked onto each separate chunk of cursed energy. With a low, resonant hum, he activated a devouring skill, invisible to the naked eye but unstoppable once triggered. Tiny black orbs coalesced in midair around each curse, then collapsed inward, sucking the entities into nothingness. The entire underground chamber seemed to vibrate as the curses were eradicated en masse. When the final echo faded, the space fell silent. Not even a whimper remained. Gojo let out a soft chuckle. "You know, you're making me feel lazy." Rimuru shrugged. "I don't mind letting you do the heavy lifting sometimes." Gojo smirked. "I'm sure you don't." They scanned the area, confirming no more curses lurked. Just then, Rimuru sensed a flash of familiar energy overhead. Nobara's technique. He turned to Gojo. "Nobara's fighting." Gojo nodded. "We'll cover more ground if we split. I'll check the west side. You handle the east." "Got it." Rimuru leapt onto a broken section of concrete, using it as a makeshift ramp to reach the surface. Rain drummed on the steel beams, creating a cacophony of splashing puddles and groaning metal. He dashed toward the eastern edge of the site, guided by the faint signature of Nobara's cursed energy. He found her near a half-finished elevator shaft, engaged in a fierce standoff with a monstrous curse that resembled a giant, eyeless serpent. Her nails were embedded in its scales, but the creature flailed wildly, forcing her to dodge. Megumi was there too, wrestling with a pair of smaller curses shaped like emaciated wolves. Rimuru's arrival was swift. In one fluid motion, he crushed one wolf under a burst of energy, then turned to the serpent. Nobara shouted a warning as the beast whipped its tail at him, but he caught it easily, twisting and pinning the creature in place. Nobara seized the opening, driving another nail into the curse's jaw. A resonant bang that splattered cursed ichor across the concrete. Megumi's dogs finished off the other wolf. A tense silence followed. Nobara sucked in a breath, leaning on her hammer. Thanks for the save. Rimuru gave a short nod. Any sign of Tenma or others? Megumi scanned the area, wiping sweat from his brow. Not yet, but that doesn't mean they aren't here. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the skeletal framework of nearby buildings. Thunder rolled in the distance, and the rain intensified. Nobara pushed wet strands of hair off her face, looking around warily. I've got a bad feeling about this. As if on cue, a flare of cursed energy pulsed from a higher floor of the unfinished building. Megumi stiffened. That's definitely human. It feels twisted. Nobara clicked her tongue. Tenma? Possibly, Rimuru said. Stay close. They navigated a series of rickety scaffolds and metal stairs, water dripping from every beam. The top floor was open to the sky, the wind whipping sheets of rain across the exposed concrete. A lone figure stood near the edge, cloak billowing. Even at a distance, Rimuru recognized that distinctive red hair. Tenma's eyes glowed with raw intensity when he spotted them. So you came. Rimuru stepped forward, water splashing around his ankles. You're interfering again? Tenma spread his arms, letting the wind tug at his cloak. We were studying these curses, seeing if they could be tamed or directed. You had to come and destroy them all, reckless as always. Megumi tensed. Are you insane? These curses would kill innocent people. Tenma's gaze flicked to Megumi, then dismissed him. There's a war coming, child. We need every weapon we can gather if we're to maintain the natural order against beings like him. He jabbed a finger at Rimuru. Rimuru's lips thinned. You're risking countless lives just to keep me in check? That's twisted. Tenma stepped back, revealing a half-formed sigil etched into the concrete beneath his feet. Sometimes the ends justify the means. And you, Rimuru, are the wild card that must be contained. If curses can be enslaved to that purpose, so be it. Nobara's voice trembled with anger. You're disgusting. Tenma's hands glowed with cursed energy as he spread them over the sigil. The lines flared to life, and a wave of dark power surged outward, conjuring a swirling vortex of malevolent force. Megumi grabbed Nobara's arm, dragging her back. Rimuru stood firm, the wind whipping his clothes as the vortex expanded. Rain hammered the rooftop, merging with the swirling darkness. The temperature plunged, breath clouding in the chill air. Tenma laughed, the sound echoing above the storm. This is the fruit of my research. Let's see you devour this so easily. From the center of the sigil rose a monstrous curse, a fusion of those that had escaped Rimuru's earlier annihilation and new energies siphoned from Tenma's twisted experiments. It towered over them, a hideous chimera of writhing limbs and snapping jaws, each dripping with toxic fluid. Rimuru glanced at Megumi and Nobara. Stay back, I'll handle this. Megumi hesitated, but nodded. Nobara bit her lip, frustrated at her own limitations. They both retreated, ready to provide ranged support if needed. Tenma clenched his fists, directing the monstrous curse toward Rimuru. It roared, the sound rattling the metal scaffolding. Rimuru leapt forward, meeting the beast head-on. Lightning flashed, revealing a clash of energies. The monster's claw slammed into an invisible barrier around Rimuru. He retaliated with a focused blast that tore a chunk from its torso, yet the creature reformed almost instantly, drawing power from the sigil. Tenma's eyes gleamed. I bound this entity to me. It will regenerate as long as I feed it cursed energy. Now, let's see how long you can last. Rimuru grimaced. Every chunk he tore away simply regrew. The swirling vortex of cursed energy fueled the chimera, making it effectively immortal unless he severed the link. He stepped back, analyzing the structure of Tenma's technique. The sigil was the anchor, tethering the curse's regeneration to Tenma's reserves. If Rimuru could break that anchor. The chimera surged again, swinging a scythe like appendage. Rimuru dodged smoothly, conjuring an orb of devouring energy to eat away at the curse's midsection. It howled but quickly reknitted its flesh. Tenma barked a triumphant laugh. Nothing you do matters. You can't kill it as long as I stand here. Rimuru's eyes flicked to the lines carved into the concrete. He dashed around the chimera, ignoring its snapping jaws, and lunged for the sigil. Tenma reacted instantly, unleashing a barrage of cursed projectiles. Rimuru deflected them with a swift sweep of power. The chimera howled and lashed out, forcing him to divert. Nobara took the opening. She hurled nails charged with her cursed energy, each one aiming to disrupt the sigil's lines. Tenma noticed too late. Several nails embedded themselves in the cracks of the glyph, sending small disruptions across the pattern. Sparks danced, and the chimera faltered. Rimuru seized the moment. He blurred forward, ducking under a flailing limb, and slammed a palm against the center of the sigil. A pulse of azure light erupted from his hand, devouring the cursed energy binding the formation. The glyph shattered, lines sizzling into black dust. The chimera let out a hideous shriek as it lost its regenerating link. Rimuru wasted no time. He unleashed a focused beam of his power, slicing the monster cleanly in half. Without the sigil's support, it couldn't reform. It collapsed into a pool of writhing fragments that dissolved under his devouring skill. Tenma's triumphant grin twisted into fury. He lunged at Rimuru with a dagger wreathed in cursed flames. But Rimuru caught the blade mid-swing, forging a small barrier between his hand and the molten steel. With a forceful push, he sent Tenma skidding across the slick concrete. Rain pounded them both, lightning illuminating Tenma's enraged face. He scrambled to his feet, cloak billowing. For a moment, he looked ready to charge again, but the flicker of fear in his eyes told Rimuru he knew it was over. Nobara advanced, hammer in hand. "Drop the knife and surrender, or I'll break your arms." Tenma's gaze darted between them. He sneered, then spat at the ground. "This isn't over," he growled, echoing his previous warning. Dark energy swirled around him, forming a teleportation circle. Rimuru lunged, but too late. Tenma vanished into the swirling blackness, leaving only the faint static of cursed residue behind. Nobara cursed under her breath, dropping her hammer to her side. He got away. Rimuru stood there, shoulders tense. "He'll keep coming back." Megumi joined them, dismissing his shikigami. "At least we disrupted whatever twisted experiment he was running." Thunder rolled overhead, and the three of them stood in the rain, hearts still pounding. The scaffolding creaked in the wind, reminding them they were perched on a half-finished structure, the city spread out below. Nobara swiped wet hair from her eyes. "Guess we should rendezvous with Gojo, let him know Tenma escaped." Rimuru nodded absently, his thoughts already churning. Tenma's desperation and willingness to harness curses so recklessly spelled bigger trouble. And if that faction had access to more resources, they might devise even deadlier methods to neutralize him or to wage war on the entire school. They made their way down the precarious stairwell, cold rainwater dripping from every surface. Part of Rimuru felt a sense of triumph he'd thwarted Tenma's experiment. But another part of him recognized the real conflict was just beginning. They found Gojo near the west side of the site, finishing off a few straggling curses. With his usual breezy confidence, he commented on how easily everything went. When Rimuru explained Tenma's appearance and subsequent escape, Gojo a contemplative frown. "So he's really determined to push this agenda, huh?" Gojo said, gazing out at the rain-soaked city lights. "We'll need to be on guard. People who try to harness curses for power are a plague dangerous to everyone." Nobara let out a weary breath. "I'm just glad we stopped him this time." Gojo ruffled her hair in a teasing gesture, ignoring her protests. "You did great. You all did." Rimuru stared at the pulsing glow of Tokyo's skyline. He mentioned a war coming. "With curses, with me. Maybe even with Sukuna. I just wonder how many fronts we'll have to fight on." Gojo's grin returned, though a shadow of concern lingered in his eyes. "Too many to count, probably. But hey, that's what makes life interesting." They headed back to the vehicles, drenched and exhausted. The rain let up slightly, but thunder still rumbled in the distance, as if mirroring the unresolved tension swirling around them. Back at the school, the group filed into an empty classroom to debrief. Students wore tired faces, their clothes soaked. Nobara slumped into a chair. Maki, who'd been handling the perimeter, joined them, and Megumi leaned against a wall, quietly replaying the night's events. Gojo spoke with a couple of staff members, summarizing the mission. Rimuru took a seat near Maki, grateful for a moment's rest. She eyed him, taking in his soaked attire. "You okay?" He nodded, letting out a slow breath. "Yeah, just thinking about Tenma's next move." She placed a warm hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." From across the room, Nobara caught the exchange and looked away, her expression unreadable. Rimuru could sense a swirl of emotions in her, though she kept them tightly reined. Eventually, the staff concluded the debrief. They decided to ramp up security, share data about Tenma's technique, and keep a closer watch on cursed hotspots around Tokyo. It was a patchwork plan, but better than nothing. Gojo stretched his arms overhead. "All right, we're done here. Go get some rest, everyone." The students filed out, talking quietly among themselves. Rimuru followed Maki, Nobara, and Megumi into the hallway. Maki gave him a meaningful nod. "We can talk more tomorrow. Get some sleep tonight." Nobara hefted her hammer, then shook her head as if remembering it was no longer needed. "Yeah, see you," she said, glancing at Rimuru briefly before walking away. He considered following, but something in her stance suggested she needed space. Megumi parted with a wave, leaving Rimuru alone in the corridor. He took a winding path back to his dorm, replaying the confrontation with Tenma. The memory of that twisted curse, the darkness of the sigil, and Tenma's fanatical glare all meshed into a grim tapestry. For all his overwhelming power, Rimuru couldn't simply wipe out the intangible threat of conspiracies and hidden agendas. It would take cunning, alliances, and a readiness to strike when necessary. Pushing open the door to his room, he noted the quiet hush of late night. He stripped off his soaked clothes, dried himself, and changed into something more comfortable. The adrenaline slowly drained from his veins, leaving a bone-deep fatigue. Yet, as he lay down, a heavy pulse reverberated in the back of his mind. Sukuna's presence? Or perhaps it was just his own tension. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to relax, to let sleep claim him if it could. A fleeting thought crossed his mind about Maki's steadfast determination, Nobara's fiery spirit, Shoko's calming presence. He felt anchored by these connections, however new or complicated they were. They reminded him that he wasn't just an outsider drifting in the darkness. Eventually, sleep caught up with him. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and the clouds parted just enough for a sliver of moonlight to shine over the school. Another night's peace, however fragile, settled in. Yet somewhere in Tokyo, Tenma nursed his wounds, plotting his next move. And farther still, Sukuna waited, a dark grin etched into existence, biding his time until he could face Rimuru in earnest. Whether these threats would merge or collide remained to be seen. Rimuru, at least, felt a sense of clarity. He would protect those who had welcomed him, stand by those who trusted him, and crush whatever darkness dared to threaten that fragile peace. Sleep eased his troubled mind, carrying him into uneasy dreams of swirling curses and red-haired sorcerers. Morning would come soon, bringing fresh challenges. But for now, in the shelter of Jujutsu High, he let himself drift, determined to rise stronger than ever when dawn broke. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The convergence of fates. A hollow wind swept across the campus of Jujutsu High, rustling the branches of the old cherry tree near the eastern wall. Morning sun had just begun to cast a dull glow over the rooftops, but the usual sense of rising warmth was missing. The air felt charged, as if anticipating a tempest. The students moving between buildings hurried with lowered voices, and teachers wore furrowed brows. Tension had never left since Tenma Yasuo's attack, but now it felt multiplied tenfold. Rumors of strange sightings around Tokyo whispered through every corridor. Rimuru stood near the entrance to the main building, arms folded, watching a small group of second-year students sprint across the courtyard. They looked haggard, as though they had just returned from a dawn mission. In the last few days, cursed incidents all over the city had spiked to unprecedented levels. Spontaneous swarms of curses, sudden domain-like phenomena materializing in abandoned districts, and civilians reporting nightmarish apparitions. Gojo had described it as a chain reaction, one that might lead to something catastrophic if left unchecked. Rimuru could guess who was behind it. Tenma Yasuo and his hidden supporters, stoking fear and chaos in an effort to gain leverage over Jujutsu society or to force a final showdown with Rimuru. The man's twisted experiments had only escalated since the failed attempt at the construction site. And underlying everything was the deeper, darker presence that Rimuru felt every night just behind his eyelids. Sukuna. The king of curses had grown increasingly bold, and sometimes, Rimuru heard that mocking laugh even while awake. He pressed a hand lightly to his temple, exhaling as he felt the faint echo of that presence. Quiet for now, but never gone. A sense of inevitability clung to his interactions with Sukuna, one that told him their clash was coming, whether he sought it or not. And from the rumors swirling, Sukuna wasn't the only one preparing to strike. A voice pulled him from his thoughts. Looking for Gojo? It was Maki, dressed in her standard uniform, spear slung across her back. She looked as tired as everyone else, though her posture remained confident, chin high. Rimuru let his hand fall. Among others. I was told there's a briefing for high-level missions soon. She nodded. The staff wants to coordinate with local sorcerers in Tokyo, gather any intel they can. There've been too many sightings in the last 24 hours. No one's sure if this is all random or orchestrated. Rimuru's gaze swept the courtyard. It's not random. Maki's lips tightened. Yeah, I know. Tenma's definitely stirring the pot. That freak is probably using curses as a smokescreen to hide whatever bigger plan he has in mind. He reached out, gently squeezing her shoulder. We'll find him. We've done it before. She rested her hand over his for a moment, allowing the connection. Not alone this time, she murmured, as if reading his tendency to shoulder burdens. We're all in this. He offered a small smile. I know. They stepped inside, weaving through hallways until they reached the briefing room. It was a high-ceilinged lecture hall usually reserved for advanced curse theory classes. Today, though, the seats were filled with first-grade sorcerers, second-grade students on the fast track, and a handful of special guests from outside the school. Gojo stood at the front, leaning against the edge of a wide desk. Shoko sat near him, arms crossed. Megumi, Nobara, and several other familiar faces were scattered throughout. Low murmurs filled the room as Maki and Rimuru found seats in the first row. Gojo cleared his throat, and the chatter died. He surveyed the crowd from behind his blindfold, a slight frown tugging his usually cheerful expression. All right, let's get this started. You've all seen the reports. Curses are popping up like mushrooms after rain. They're not just random small fry either, some are showing domain-capable signatures. We suspect outside tampering, meaning a certain group of sorcerers is purposely feeding negative energy into these areas. He glanced at Rimuru, but didn't linger. We have reason to believe Tenma Yasuo is involved. His group, or whoever backs him, has been pushing to harness cursed energy for their own ends. If you see or sense him, do not engage alone. He's used partial domains, advanced barrier tech, and who knows what new tricks he's got up his sleeve. Someone raised a hand, a middle-aged sorcerer in a dark jacket. What about the rumored king of curses? Are we dealing with Sukuna as well? Gojo pursed his lips. Sukuna is still bound to Itadori Yuji. Our intel suggests he's not rampaging free, but his influence is spiking. He could hijack Yuji at any moment if the conditions are right. That means we can't ignore his presence either. A murmur rippled through the room. Rimuru watched as several sorcerers exchanged uneasy looks. The conversation about Sukuna usually went one of two ways. Fear or denial. None of them could forget that the King of Curses had once threatened the entire world, and if not for Itadori's iron will and the system of jujutsu sorcerers around him, he might do so again. Now, with Rimuru here, Sukuna's interest had intensified. Everyone felt it, even if they couldn't quite articulate it. Gojo held up a hand, restoring quiet. For now, we focus on controlling the outbreak. Teams will head to designated hotspots, each led by at least one first-grade or higher sorcerer. We do not want students going alone. Our goal: clear curses, gather intel on Tenma's faction, and prevent any large-scale domain expansions that could threaten civilians. Got it? Nods of agreement. The group began dividing into squads, scanning the map that glowed on a projector screen behind Gojo. Multiple red dots indicated cursed hotspots across the greater Tokyo area, an alarming density that spelled trouble. Megumi and Nobara joined Maki and Rimuru in forming a core group with Gojo. They'd be one of the primary strike forces, assigned to the densest cluster of curses near Shibuya Station, apparently an epicenter of negative energy for the last 48 hours. Another group would cover the area around the Tokyo Metropolitan Building, rumored to be crawling with newly manifested curses. And smaller squads fanned out to cover lesser zones. Shoko raised a hand at the edge of the desk. I'll stay in a mobile capacity, handling emergency healings. If the worst happens, call me immediately. With that, The briefing ended. People rose to their feet, exchanging final remarks or worried glances. Rimuru felt Maki nudge him lightly. Ready? He gave a short nod. Yeah. Let's go. Nobara was already by the door, tapping her foot impatiently. Megumi stood beside her, quietly tightening the straps of a satchel that likely contained cursed tools. Gojo ushered them along, humming an off-key tune, as though oblivious to the gravity of the situation. They emerged into the courtyard, the morning sun now fully risen but hidden behind gauzy clouds that threatened rain. Cars had been readied. Each strike team would head out in official vehicles or, in Gojo's case, something less official but infinitely faster. He fished out a set of keys to a sleek black SUV. Nobara grimaced when she saw who'd be driving. Any chance we can take the train instead? Gojo gave her a wide grin. Where's your sense of adventure? Megumi sighed, resigning himself to the inevitable. Maki hopped into the passenger seat, while Rimuru took a spot in the back with Nobara. He felt a subtle tension radiating from her. Maybe it was the idea of facing another outbreak or the memory of how wild Gojo's driving could be. The engine roared to life, and they sped off through the school gates, merging onto the main road. Just behind them, a convoy of other sorcerers split in different directions, heading to their assigned areas. A sense of finality charged the air, as though they were all soldiers mobilizing for a crucial battle. Nobara drummed her fingers against the window, her gaze locked on the passing city streets. I hate this feeling, she muttered, half to herself. Like we're being cornered into something big. Maki looked over her shoulder. We are. Tenma's spiking the negativity to lure out stronger curses, but I bet his real objective is forcing us to scatter. Then he can strike where we're weakest. Rimuru nodded. Let him come. We'll deal with whatever he's planning. Gojo laughed, weaving between cars with supernatural reflexes. That's the spirit, Rimuru. We'll smash these curses and then pay Tenma a personal visit. He might regret sticking around Tokyo after all. Despite the bravado, no one missed the grim undercurrent in Gojo's voice. This was no ordinary mission. Tenma had grown bolder with every confrontation, and it wasn't just about Rimuru anymore. Entire chunks of the city were in danger. They reached Shibuya Station in record time, screeching to a halt near an intersection cordoned off by police. The officers were clearly out of their depth, their radio calls frantic. Although they couldn't see curses, they sensed something horrific in the air enough to keep civilians away. People milled around, uneasy, some filming the closed-off streets with their phones. Gojo flashed a credential, and they were allowed past the barricade. Nobara hopped out first, hoisting her hammer onto her shoulder. Megumi released his dogs from his shadow, the spectral beasts padding beside him with ears alert. Maki drew her spear in one swift motion, scanning the tall buildings that loomed overhead. Rimuru felt it immediately, a swirling malevolence that seemed to gather over Shibuya Crossing, like a storm cloud of cursed energy. The sky overhead dimmed unnaturally, though the sun should still have been visible. He closed his eyes for a moment, stretching out his senses. At least half a dozen large curses prowled nearby, possibly more. Gojo gave a low whistle. It's like a buffet of curses. Let's not get overwhelmed. They split into pairs for better coverage. Nobara and Megumi took a route around the north side, cutting through a maze of closed shops, while Gojo and Maki circled to the west. Rimuru, deciding to keep the greatest vantage, leapt onto a ledge above the station's entrance, scanning the chaos below. His vantage gave him a broad sweep of the area. The usually bustling streets looked eerie, empty except for flickers of shadow where curses roamed. Every few seconds, he heard distant crashes or roars, followed by flashes of cursed energy, likely his companions engaging the threats. 2 blocks away, Gojo's aura flared, bright and overpowering, and Rimuru could guess the man was already dismantling curses. A bit further along, Maki's distinct presence flickered as she cut down smaller threats, curses that scuttled out from alleyways. Then he spotted something more significant, a monstrous shape clinging to the side of a department store, 8 limbs spindly like a spider's, each tipped with a blade of bone. It was easily the size of a small bus. Pedestrians had fled, but a few police officers crouched behind cars, helpless. Rimuru launched himself off the ledge, crossing the distance in a single bound. The curse sensed him, swiveling a hideous, multi-eyed face in his direction. It hissed, drooling scion in the air spiked as it coiled, preparing to pounce. Rimuru calmly raised a hand. In a flicker of motion, he conjured a ball of devouring energy, sending it streaking forward. The curse tried to scuttle away, but the sphere caught its hind limbs, disintegrating them into black dust. It shrieked, plummeting to the street below with a thunderous crash. Before it could regenerate, Rimuru landed beside it, the ground buckling under the force. He pressed a palm against its carapace. A single pulse of azure light devoured the creature from within, leaving no trace but a faint residue of cursed energy that dissipated in the humid air. The police gaped, but Rimuru was already moving on. He took a quick second to check on the others, homing in on Maki's aura. She was 3 blocks away, engaged with 2 mid-grade curses shaped like emaciated dogs. He sprinted in that direction, bounding across deserted crosswalks. The moment he rounded a corner, he saw Maki finishing off the second beast, plunging her spear with a resolute thrust. Its shriek ended abruptly. She caught sight of him and gave a curt nod. "How's the perimeter?" "I cleared 1 large spider-like curse." "You?" She flicked blood from her spear. "Mostly mid-tier, nothing special grade. But the negativity around here feels like it's building." Rimuru's senses prickled in agreement. "Yeah, it's like they're being drawn to something deeper. Tenma might have placed a focus or barrier." They heard a distant explosion, followed by a ripple of energy that made the hair on Rimuru's arms stand on end. That was definitely Gojo's power reacting to something. Without wasting breath, they sprinted together in the direction of the disturbance, weaving through abandoned cars and shattered glass. The city felt like a haunted ghost town, a strange hush overlaid by the crackle of curses flaring to life. They found Gojo in front of a tall skyscraper, infinity swirling around him. He was facing off against a humanoid curse that bristled with spines. The creature hurled bolts of purple energy, each one halting just centimeters from Gojo's face before disintegrating. With a bored sigh, Gojo snapped his fingers, and the curse imploded, fragments of black dust scattering. Maki slid to a stop, breathing hard. Gojo gave her a playful salute. "All good here, Maki." She arched an eyebrow. "What was that blast?" Gojo dusted his jacket, glancing at the ruined street. "Just a curse trying something fancy. Didn't last long." His tone shifted, more serious. "I think the real threat is deeper underground. I keep sensing these surges from below the station's infrastructure." Rimuru nodded. "I felt them too. Tenma must have set up something big." At that moment, Megumi's voice crackled through a communicator. "We've got a situation on the north side. Something, it looks like it's forming a barrier around the entire crossing. I can't get out." Gojo frowned, lifting his own communicator. "A barrier? That means a domain or a domain precursor. Hang tight, Fushiguro. We'll find the anchor." Nobara's voice chimed in, sounding breathless. "Hurry. This thing's messing with my cursed energy flow. I can barely keep my nails stable." Rimuru exchanged a glance with Maki and Gojo. If Tenma's group had erected a barrier, it could be a large-scale trap, maybe even an incomplete domain that covered several blocks. That might be why the curses kept appearing. It also meant infiltration. Tenma's people had to be physically present, or at least controlling it from a vantage point. Gojo pointed to a skyscraper overlooking the crossing. "I'll check from above, see if I can spot any obvious anchor or symbol. You two handle ground-level searching." Maki jerked her head in agreement. "Got it." Without further ado, Gojo leapt into the air, using a combination of cursed energy and his infinity to scale the building's facade. Rimuru and Maki split off toward the center of the crossing, heading for the underground passages that ran beneath Shibuya. They descended into a labyrinth of tunnels, some connected to the subway lines, others to maintenance shafts. Emergency lighting flickered, painting the walls in sickly yellow. The deeper they went, the thicker the cursed energy became, pressing on them like an invisible weight. Maki exhaled, gripping her spear more tightly. "I hate it down here." Rimuru scanned every corner, ready to strike at the slightest movement. "We'll find the anchor. Just stay close." A faint scurrying echo reached them, and Maki reacted, lunging forward. Her spear blade found flesh, another dog-like curse, easily dispatched with a single thrust. The corridor reeked of stagnant water and rotting trash. Water dripped from overhead pipes in irregular bursts, forming pools along the cracked tiles. They pressed on, eventually reaching a wide underground chamber that must have been part of an old service tunnel. Large pillars supported a dripping ceiling. The stagnant air felt suffocating. And there, in the center, perched on a chunk of concrete, stood a figure cloaked in black. Even from behind, Rimuru recognized that red hair. Tenma Yasuo turned slowly, a condescending smile etched on his face. About time. Maki stiffened, spear at the ready. You again. Rimuru took a measured step forward. Drop the barrier, Tenma. You're endangering everyone in Shibuya. Tenma gave a mocking laugh, echoing off the damp walls. Yes, I am. And you know why? Because fear is the fastest way to push sorcerers toward desperate measures. The more curses that roam, the more the powers that be realize they need solutions are solutions. Maki let out a low growl. There's no place for your twisted experiments in Jujutsu society. People will never accept you. Tenma shrugged. They will if they have no choice, or they'll perish. Either way, we rid ourselves of that meddling council and the illusions that beings like Rimuru here are safe. Rimuru's eyes flashed. You're risking thousands of innocent lives for your personal crusade. Tenma's smile hardened. I'm risking the world to save it. You, Rimuru, are an existential threat. A monstrous vortex of power from another dimension, capable of devouring anything. Today, I finish what I started. He raised his arms, and lines of cursed energy rippled across the floor, forming intricate sigils around the pillars. A pulse of dark purple light surged upward, and the chamber's ceiling groaned. The air thickened with malignant energy that crackled along the walls. Maki cursed under her breath. He's channeling a domain again, but bigger. Rimuru stepped forward, matching Tenma's intense gaze. Stop this. You don't stand a chance. Tenma's laughter rang out, a note of near madness in it. Don't be so sure. You haven't seen the fruits of my research yet. His hands moved in a rapid series of gestures, weaving cursed energy into the sigils. The floor trembled, then cracked. From the gap rose a monstrous figure more massive than any of the curses encountered above. It had no real form at first, just a swirling mass of dark fluid that pulsed in sync with Tenma's energy. Slowly, it coalesced into a nightmarish shape. An amalgamation of thousands of lesser curses, fused into a single entity that dripped tar like goo. Multiple heads jutted from its torso, each contorted with agony. Maki took a step back, bracing. That thing is enormous. Rimuru felt the wave of negativity slam into his senses. If Tenma was controlling this beast with the same method as before using a domain like anchor, then it could keep regenerating. He had to break the anchor. Yet the swirling lines around the pillars looked more complex than any technique Tenma had used previously. It was as if 100 cursed scripts layered over one another. The monster roared, shaking the chamber. Maki lunged in, spear aiming for its center. But a massive tendril lashed out, almost too quick to see, knocking her aside before she could strike. She crashed, aiming at the impact. Rimuru moved swiftly, catching her before she slumped to the ground. You okay? She grit her teeth, wincing but still conscious. I'm fine. Just watch that thing's reach. The monster turned its attention to Rimuru now, head after head screeching in disharmony. Tenma hovered behind it, smirking as he channeled more cursed energy. With each surge, the monster's body pulsed, thickening with new layers. Rimuru set Maki gently aside, adrenaline firing through his veins. I'll handle the big one. Break the anchor if you can. She panted, nodding. Right. Rimuru advanced, summoning an orb of devouring power in his palm. The monster sensed the threat and unleashed a barrage of dark tendrils, each tipped with a jagged maw. He sidestepped fluidly, letting the tendrils slam into the floor, cracking the tiles. A quick slash of his energy severed them. The monster recoiled, shrieking. But almost instantly, it regrew the lost limbs, reforming them with globs of black tar. Tenma's voice echoed. Doesn't matter how many times you slice it, Rimuru. It'll keep coming back, unless you can sever me. Rimuru's eyes narrowed. You're not making this easy. He channeled more of his devouring skill, hurling a wave of unstoppable force at the creature. The monster's torso disintegrated on contact, leaving a gaping hole. But in seconds, black ooze poured in, rebuilding the shape. Tenma's laughter boomed. You see? I've perfected the regeneration. My domain script channels negativity from the entire Shibuya barrier, every ounce of fear and panic above, fueling this beast. Maki scrambled toward one of the pillars, examining the swirling lines. She recognized some of the glyphs from the previous battles, but they were far more intricate now. She tried slashing at them with her spear, but the moment her blade connected, a shockwave of cursed energy knocked her back again. The anchor was protected by a defensive ward. Rimuru realized time was short. The longer the barrier stood, the more curses would gather, and the heavier the monstrous form would become. Overhead, he sensed Nobara and Megumi fighting to hold off curses flooding the crossing. And he hadn't felt Gojo's presence in some time, likely busy handling an onslaught on the surface. They had to end this fast. He steadied himself, letting his aura expand. The devouring skill he'd been using was potent, but he could push it further. In his own world, he transcended mortal limitations. That was no different here, as long as he didn't hold back. With a deep breath, he tapped into the enormous well of power at his core, an endless swirl of energy that made even advanced curses tremble. His eyes glowed with a fierce light. For an instant, the monster paused, sensing a fundamental shift in the air. Tenma's smile faltered. "What are you?" Rimuru didn't reply. He extended both hands, and a vortex of pale blue radiance began to form around him, twisting the air into a spiraling column. The chamber reverberated with raw power, cracks spider webbing across the concrete floor. Even Maki had to brace herself, squinting against the sudden glare. Tenma let out a snarl, forcing more energy into the monster. "Don't just stand there. Finish him." The creature roared and launched itself, tendrils lashing in a storm of tar and bone. Rimuru unleashed the vortex of devouring energy in a single explosive thrust, colliding with the monster's center. The chamber lit up like 100 fireworks, all bursting at once. For a heartbeat, everything was blinding white. When the brightness receded, the monster's entire front half was gone, disintegrated. Its moaning echoes filled the dome-like space as it struggled to reform. Rimuru took advantage of that momentary weakness, rushing through the swirling tar and aiming directly for Tenma. Tenma's eyes widened in alarm. He raised a barrier of swirling sigils, but Rimuru tore through it in a burst of azure light. Before Tenma could react, Rimuru seized him by the collar, lifting him off his feet. "You can't keep fueling that creature forever," Rimuru said coldly. "Stop this." Tenma spat, eyes flashing. "Never." With his free hand, Tenma stabbed a concealed dagger into Rimuru's side, a cursed blade wreathed in crackling violet. Sparks arced as the weapon hit, but Rimuru's body absorbed the cursed energy like a drop in an ocean. He winced slightly at the impact, but the wound knit itself almost immediately. Tenma's expression wavered, the first hint of genuine fear creeping in. He tried pulling away, but Rimuru's grip was iron. In desperation, Tenma summoned a wave of cursed flames around them both. Rimuru let out a low grunt as the heat singed the edges of his jacket. But a moment later, he enveloped Tenma's entire arm in devouring energy, snuffing out the flames. In the corner of his vision, Rimuru saw Maki struggle to maintain her footing, the swirling domain lines still pulsing. The monstrous curse, half reformed, prepared another lunge. If it got free again, the entire city above would be at risk. Rimuru realized that while he held Tenma, he needed a final blow that would destroy both the anchor and the domain script. The longer he delayed, the more curses would flood in. He just hoped Maki, Megumi, Nobara, and Gojo could hold out above. With a steady glare, Rimuru poured more power into his next move. Tenma wriggled, panic replacing defiance. "This is bigger than you know," he hissed, voice cracking. "I serve a greater purpose, my master," he has foreseen. Rimuru silenced him by tightening his grip. Enough. He released Tenma in one swift motion, only to slam a palm into the center of his chest. Azure flames of energy flared, sending Tenma flying across the chamber. His body smashed into a pillar, fracturing the concrete. The lines on the pillar sputtered as Tenma's cursed energy flickered. The monstrous curse howled, stuttering in its regeneration. Maki sprang into action, lunging at the anchor lines once more. The ward sparked, but its force was weaker now, destabilized by Tenma's partial defeat. She braced herself and drove her spear's tip into the largest sigil. With a cry, she pushed cursed energy through the weapon. The glyph exploded in a burst of purple light, cracks racing outward from that point. Immediately, the monster convulsed, pieces of its tar-like body sloughing off. Rimuru seized the moment. Summoning every ounce of devouring force he could muster, He thrust his hands out, unleashing a grand wave of shimmering power. It swallowed the monster in an instant, compressing it into a swirling vortex. The creature screeched, limbs thrashing, but it had no anchor left to sustain it. With a final, ear-splitting keen, the monstrous curse dissolved into black particles, each devoured by Rimuru's unstoppable skill. The chamber fell silent, except for the dripping of water and the rasp of Maki's breath. Tenma coughed, slumped against the cracked pillar. His cloak was in tatters, blood oozing from his mouth. He stared at Rimuru with a mixture of hatred and astonishment. "How did you?" Rimuru approached, eyes calm but unwavering. "Your domain is gone. Surrender, or—" A sudden spike of cursed energy interrupted him. Tenma's eyes rolled back, his body convulsing. A swirling aura of deep black and crimson shot from his chest, as though something else were controlling him now. His voice emerged in an unnatural growl. "He is near, your presence beckons him." Maki staggered to Rimuru's side, confusion etched in her face. "What is that?" Before Rimuru could respond, Tenma let out a harrowing scream. The cursed aura around him coalesced into an eerie outline of a face, multiple eyes, a jagged mouth. Rimuru felt a chill of recognition. Sukuna's energy. But it wasn't exactly Sukuna himself. It was as if Tenma was channeling or referencing that same primordial malevolence. "Rimuru, he calls," Tenma rasped, blood coating his lips. His eyes glowed scarlet, a final flash of defiance. "You is." Then the aura faded. Tenma's body went limp, sliding down the pillar. His breathing shallowed, and his eyes closed. Whether he was dead or merely unconscious was hard to tell. The domain lines had fully dissipated, leaving the space eerily quiet. Maki let out a shaky exhale, glancing at Rimuru. We should get him out of here, right?" He frowned, scanning Tenma's still form. "I'm not sure he'll survive that wound. But we can't leave him." They both tensed at a sudden lurch in the chamber's foundation. With the domain anchor gone, the underground structure had become unstable. Water gushed through new cracks in the walls, and chunks of concrete started falling. Maki ducked a falling chunk of debris. "This place is coming down." Rimuru hoisted Tenma over his shoulder without hesitation. "Let's move." They sprinted through the corridor they'd come from, water rising around their ankles. Each quake shook the floors, threatening to bury them alive. Maki led the way, spear in hand, swatting aside lesser curses that still lingered in the tunnels. Whatever barrier had held them earlier was gone, so they found the exit to the surface relatively quickly. They emerged onto a side street near Shibuya Crossing. The sky was brighter now, the unnatural gloom lifting as the barrier collapsed. Civilians and police were still scattered, but far fewer than before. Many had probably been evacuated. Across the intersection, Nobara and Megumi stood with their backs to a smashed storefront, breathing heavily. A half-dozen exorcised curses lay in black heaps around them. Nobara's hammer dripped with viscous ooze, while Megumi's shikigami panted at his feet. Nobara spotted Rimuru and Maki stumbling out, Tenma's unconscious form slung over Rimuru's shoulder. Her eyes widened. "You got him?" Maki nodded, voice taut. "It's over. We think he triggered something." The entire domain collapsed. Megumi eyed Tenma. "Is he still alive?" Rimuru carefully lowered Tenma to the ground, checking for a pulse. It was faint, but present. "He's alive for now. We need Shoko or medical staff." As if on cue, a swirl of white fabric signaled Shoko's arrival. She rushed over, dropping to her knees beside Tenma. With quick efficiency, she checked his vitals and scowled. "He's in bad shape. Let me see if I can stabilize him." Nobara bit her lip, kneeling on the opposite side. "Why bother saving him? After all he's done, he'll probably just—" Rimuru placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression solemn. "We need answers, and letting him die like this won't help anyone." She blew out a breath. "Fine." Shoko's cursed technique glowed faintly around her hands, knitting torn flesh and stabilizing the battered sorcerer. Maki exhaled in relief. Her battered arm hung at a painful angle, but she refused to show more than a wince, keeping an eye on the perimeter. Meanwhile, Megumi commanded his dogs to scout the area, ensuring no more curses lurked. The air felt cleaner, less oppressive. The barrier's dissolution seemed to have cleared the unnatural negativity over Shibuya. Rimuru's communicator crackled. Gojo's voice came through, almost casual despite the noise of curses in the background. "Hey, good job down there. The barrier's gone. I guess you found the anchor?" "Yeah," Rimuru said into the device. "We have Tenma in custody. Are you okay up there?" Gojo's laugh echoed. "Alive and kicking. I've cleared most of the big nasties. A few squads are sweeping the rest. I'll rendezvous with you soon." Rimuru ended the call, letting out a breath. He glanced at Nobara and Megumi. "We should help with the cleanup, make sure all curses are gone." Nobara nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "Right." Just as they prepared to move out, Shoko gave a quiet exclamation. Tenma's eyes fluttered open, watery and unfocused. His voice came as a rasp. "Too late, it's too late." Maki crouched, ignoring her own pain. "Tenma, talk to us. What's too late?" He coughed up blood, eyes full of a strange fervor. "My part was only the beginning. Do you truly think you're the only powerful outsider here?" Rimuru's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Tenma's breath rattled. "My master, he promised me we could harness the curses, that we'd overshadow even Sukuna. And he's nearly awakened." His gaze shifted to Rimuru, a broken smile on his lips. "You'll face something far beyond me. And when you do, it will devour you." A chill slid down Rimuru's spine. "Who is your master? Give us a name." But Tenma's eyes rolled back. Shoko pressed her fingers to his neck, frustration etched in her features. "He's crashing. I can't keep him stable if he keeps thrashing like this." "Damn it," Nobara muttered. Tenma let out one final breath, the energy draining from his body. Shoko tried desperately to resuscitate him, but the cursed wounds inside him were too extensive. He twitched once, then went still, the last spark of life fading from his eyes. Silence settled over them. Despite everything Tenma had done, the finality of death felt stark. Maki lowered her spear, her shoulders slumping. Nobara quietly looked away, jaw clenched. Megumi's expression was grim. Rimuru watched as Tenma's red hair fell across his forehead, his face slack and pale. This twisted man, consumed by a mission to control or destroy Rimuru, was gone. But in his dying words, he had hinted at something worse, some unknown master on the horizon. Shoko exhaled shakily. "He's gone. I'm sorry." Rimuru knelt for a moment, resting a hand near Tenma's shoulder. "Don't be. You tried." A gust of wind swept the street, rustling bits of debris and echoing the emptiness of the aftermath. Sirens blared in the distance, emergency vehicles converging on Shibuya. The barrier had dissolved, but the city was left with scars, broken windows, scorched pavement, wrecked storefronts. And the uneasy aura of mass curses would linger in people's minds for a long time. Gojo appeared a few minutes later, dropping from a rooftop. He surveyed the scene, eyes lingering on Tenma's corpse. "So that's that, huh?" Rimuru gave a mute nod, rising to his feet. "He mentioned a master. Something bigger." Gojo sighed. "Always something bigger. Did he give a name?" "Not exactly. But apparently, it's someone who wants to overshadow even Sukuna." Rimuru frowned, glancing at the darkening sky. Clouds thickened overhead again, though it was only midday. "We should regroup at the school. Let everyone know what happened." Gojo patted him on the shoulder. "Agreed. Let's finish the sweep and head back." Rimuru, Maki, and the others then spent the next hour ensuring no more curses roamed the crossing. Most had evaporated once the barrier broke, but a few stragglers remained, easily dispatched. Emergency crews moved in to help any civilians who had been trapped or wounded. By the time they were done, the tension in the air had eased, replaced by the mundane chaos of sirens and official vehicles. They returned to Jujutsu High in the late afternoon. The sun dipped below the horizon earlier than usual, hidden by storm clouds. Wet leaves clung to the courtyard paths, and the air smelled of damp earth. A gathering formed in one of the larger auditorium's faculty, students, plus a few sorcerers from outside the school who had assisted. Megumi, Nobara, and Maki took seats near the front, shoulders slumped from fatigue. Rimuru stood beside Gojo, who relayed the events in Shibuya to the senior staff. They covered Tenma's final words, the monstrous curses, and the infiltration of the underground domain. An uneasy hush fell when Gojo mentioned the reference to a master overshadowing Sukuna. Eyes darted around the room, and the older sorcerers conferred in quiet whispers. Finally, the woman who led the briefing in Chapter 2, an older sorcerer with graying hair, stepped forward, addressing the group. We have no record of anyone who is master. But with his domain designs, it's possible he was backed by a hidden lineage or a new cult. In this climate, anyone with knowledge of cursed energy might try to exploit it. Another elder rubbed his temples. We should also consider the possibility of a foreign curse user, someone not part of Japan's jujutsu system. If they're powerful enough, they could remain undetected until now. Gojo tossed a glance at Rimuru. Well, we have an expert on dimensional travel, don't we? Rimuru didn't bite on the banter. I felt no sign of another traveler like me, but I won't rule anything out. A chorus of hushed conversation broke out. Many were relieved that Tenma was gone, but the possibility of a greater threat, one that might rival Sukuna, left the room tense. They concluded the meeting with instructions to stay vigilant. Cleanup operations in Shibuya would continue, and a rotating watch would guard the city against any new domain expansions. Officially, the crisis was over, but beneath the surface, everyone sensed a new tension brewing. Rimuru slipped out of the auditorium, intending to find a quiet corner to think. Before he could get far, Nobara caught up with him. Hey, you heading somewhere? He paused, noticing the tired lines beneath her eyes. Just needed some air. You? She shrugged, fiddling with her hammer's handle. Same. Mind if I join? He shook his head. Not at all. They walked in silence through the hallway, eventually emerging into the courtyard. The storm clouds above had settled into a gloomy overcast, with occasional flashes of lightning far off on the horizon. A chill breeze rustled the bushes and the old cherry tree. Nobara set her hammer aside, leaning against a concrete pillar. Tenma's done, but it doesn't feel like we won. Rimuru joined her, crossing his arms. Because he hinted at something bigger. Another threat on the way. She nodded, biting her lip. Can't we have a break? It's always one crisis after another. A soft laugh escaped him. That's the nature of this world, isn't it? Curses and conflict. She turned to face him, expression serious. I guess so, but I hate seeing people hurt, and I hate feeling helpless. He rested a comforting hand on her shoulder. You weren't helpless out there. You fought. You saved people. She lowered her eyes, then mustered a tiny smile. I know, but I keep thinking about the next time, how it could be worse. Rimuru gently cupped her cheek, drawing her attention. Then we face it together. She searched his gaze, emotions swirling behind her brown eyes: fear, hope, determination. After a moment, she leaned in, pressing her lips to his in a brief, quiet kiss. The contact was warm, their breath mingling in the cool evening air. She pulled back, a flush creeping across her cheeks. Thanks, she whispered. He smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of her hair aside. No need to thank me. Lightning flickered in the distance, highlighting the shapes of the school buildings. Nobara exhaled, looking out across the dark yard. Guess we should get some rest before whatever happens next. Rimuru nodded. Yeah. You've earned it. She gathered her hammer, cast him one last glance, and headed for the dorms. Rimuru remained there, letting the wind pick up, thinking about Maki's wounds, Nobara's uncertainty, Megumi's quiet resolve, and Shoko's unwavering support. Each of them was strong in their own way, but it felt like they were all on the precipice of something deeper. Tenma's cryptic words echoed in his mind. You'll face something far beyond me. It will devour you. A flicker of presence made him turn. This time, it was Shoko. She approached with an umbrella, though it wasn't raining just yet, and offered a small nod. I saw you two talking, she said mildly. He rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, just needed a moment. She tilted her head, gaze searching. You always carry so much on your shoulders, more than we realize, I think. He shrugged, letting out a small breath. Maybe, but that's my choice. She studied him a moment longer, then stepped closer, placing a cool hand on his chest. I can feel the tension in you, physically. Even your muscles are wound tight. He allowed a slight grin. Didn't know you made house calls for stress relief. She chuckled softly, her dark eyes glinting with a teasing spark. Only for special patients. A moment of silence passed as they stood there, the crisp air weaving between them. Then, with a subtle shift, she leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips, softer than Maki's fierce claims, less impulsive than Nobara's heated moments, but warm and certain in its own way. Rimuru reciprocated, savoring the calm that Shoko's presence offered. They drew apart, each breath a small plume in the cool temperature. She let her hand slip away, carefully adjusting her umbrella. "Come to the infirmary if you have any aches or injuries. Even if you think they're minor." He nodded, a fond look in his eyes. "Thanks, I will." She gave him a final, faint smile and turned, heading back inside. The courtyard felt somehow quieter, as though the wind itself was holding its breath. Rimuru leaned against a pillar, closing his eyes. In the space of days, his relationships with these remarkable women had deepened, each in a unique, compelling way. He felt the ties growing stronger, yet also the weight of responsibility pressing down. Could he protect them all if the next threat truly rivaled Sukuna? He gazed up at the swirling clouds, a spark of resolution in his chest. He would find a way. The next 2 days were eerily calm, aside from standard missions to clear minor curses. Students attended classes, staff held strategy sessions. Outwardly, Jujutsu High seemed almost normal, but no one believed the lull would last. Tenma's ominous warnings lingered like poison in the back of everyone's mind. Rimuru spent the time helping with city-wide sweeps, ensuring no new domain expansions were forming. He also joined advanced training sessions with Maki and Nobara, pushing them to refine their techniques. Megumi joined occasionally, his seriousness a steady anchor. In between, Shoko ran checks on possible leads regarding Tenma's rumored master. Nothing turned up, almost as though the threat was deliberately hiding in the shadows. He found respite in moments stolen with Maki, Nobara, or Shoko. The hush of the campus at dusk became an odd sanctuary where he could share a laugh or a soft exchange, reminding himself that life was more than endless battles. Yet even these moments carried an undercurrent of urgency, as though time was slipping through their fingers. On the 3rd day after Shibuya, everything changed. Morning light streamed into the main building's atrium, glinting off polished floors and tall windows. Rimuru was reviewing some curse analysis data with Maki when a sudden crackle of cursed energy reverberated through the halls. He froze, feeling an inexplicable shift, as though the entire dimension quivered for a split second. Maki's eyes widened. What was that? Before he could answer, an alarm blared over the school's intercom system. The voice of a junior staff member crackled through. "All high-level sorcerers, report to the west courtyard immediately. Anomalous surge, multiple special grade signals. This is not a drill." Rimuru and Maki bolted from the atrium, almost colliding with Nobara and Megumi, who were sprinting from another hallway. Nobara panted, "You felt it?" Rimuru nodded grimly. "Special grades, multiple. Not normal curses. We have to see for ourselves." They ran to the west courtyard. The sight that greeted them was unlike anything they'd seen before. 5 towering shapes loomed just beyond the school's outer wall, curses so massive, their outlines shimmered in the morning haze like living mountains. Each bristled with malevolent power, warping the air around them. Staff and students lined the ramparts, some trembling at cursed energy emanating from these monstrosities. Gojo was there, standing atop the wall, blindfold drifting in the breeze. He turned as Rimuru and the others approached. "We've got a problem," he said, voice unusually sober. "Those curses just appeared out of thin air. It's like someone teleported them here specifically to attack the school." Shoko arrived, eyes scanning the monstrous shapes. "They're all special grade for sure, and they're not even trying to hide it." Maki gripped her spear. "Tenma's master, could he be behind this?" Gojo nodded slowly. "Almost definitely. We just got word. Other jujutsu schools across Japan are also under siege by massive curses appearing without warning. It's coordinated." Nobara's knuckles whitened around her hammer. "So it starts." Megumi summoned his Shikigami, glancing to Rimuru. "We need a plan." All eyes turned to Gojo. He flicked his blindfold up, revealing serious blue eyes. "We can't let them rampage here. Evacuate all lower-grade students. Anyone below 1st grade should retreat inside the main building's reinforced wards. The rest of us handle the threats head-on. I'll take the biggest one." "Rimuru," he trailed off, meeting Rimuru's gaze. "Pick one and handle it. Don't hold back." Rimuru steadied himself. "Got it." As staff rushed to carry out the evacuation, the jujutsu sorcerers formed squads. Maki, Nobara, and Megumi insisted on fighting alongside Rimuru, despite the danger. Shoko prepared an emergency field station, determined to handle the inevitable injuries. The monstrous curses began advancing, each step shaking the ground. Their roars split the morning air, a hideous chorus. Some bore elongated limbs, others had formless torsos writhing with lesser curses. The largest, a hulking behemoth with 6 arms, stomped toward the main gate. Gojo leapt from the wall, infinity crackling around him like a living barrier. He didn't bother with jokes, now his expression was all steely focus. Rimuru, Maki, Nobara, and Megumi headed for a second giant that slithered like an immense centipede, its segmented body wreathed in flickering black flames. Upon seeing them, it let out a shrieking hiss, flames belching from the orifices along its side. The heat was oppressive even from 50 meters away. With a swift command, Megumi sent his Shikigami forward, the spectral canines lunging to test the curse's defenses. The centipede screeched, rolling its massive coils to crush them. Maki dashed in next, spear scoring a deep gouge in the creature's chitinous hide. Nobara pelted it with cursed nails, each landing with small explosions of energy. Yet for all their combined attacks, the creature's hide was thick, regenerating almost instantly with dark flames. Rimuru drew in a breath, letting his devouring aura flare. "I'll open it up. You 3 find a weak spot." They nodded, scattering to flank the beast. Rimuru concentrated, summoning a swirling sphere of azure power. He launched it at the centipede's midsection. The sphere bored through the segmented exoskeleton, eliciting a tortured shriek. Black ichor sprayed, sizzling where it touched the ground. The creature buckled, but flames erupted from within the wound, sealing it almost at once. Nobara cursed. "It's healing too fast." Maki circled behind the centipede, hurling a spiked chain at one of its massive legs. She yanked hard, unbalancing the creature slightly. Megumi's dogs seized the opening, tearing at the leg's joints. The centipede howled, thrashing violently. One flailing segment smashed into a nearby building, sending rubble everywhere. Nobara dove clear just in time, but her arm got scraped by flying debris. Rimuru seized the opportunity to channel a second wave of devouring power. He poured in more force this time, his aura crackling with intensity. When he unleashed it, the vortex tore a chunk from the centipede's center. For a moment, the monster convulsed, greenish flames flickering uncertainly. Then, with a deafening roar, it started to split down the middle, as if dividing into 2 separate curses. Maki yelled, "It's reproducing." Rimuru, "Stop it." He gritted his teeth, launching another devouring wave. This time, it crushed the splitting segment entirely, leaving only a writhing mass of half-dead tissue. The rest of the centipede reeled, unable to complete the fission. Nobara took advantage, driving several nails into the exposed underside. With a fierce cry, she hammered them in, each blow resonating with her cursed technique. Boom! Boom, segments blew apart, the black flame stuttering out. Megumi's dogs lunged for the creature's head, sinking spectral fangs into its mandibles. Meanwhile, Maki vaulted onto its back, plunging her spear through multiple chitin plates. The beast bucked and writhed, but it was pinned on all sides, chunks of its body dissolving under the combined onslaught. Finally, Rimuru closed in, pressing his palm to the creature's main trunk. He unleashed a focused burst of devouring skill, unraveling the monstrous form from within. In seconds, it collapsed into a steaming mound of dissolving flesh, black flame sputtering out. The roars ceased. Breathing heavily, the group stepped back. Ash and embers drifted in the wind. Nobara coughed, wiping sweat and grime from her face. Maki limped slightly, but her expression was resolute. Megumi knelt, dispelling his Shikigami to let them recover. Rimuru looked around. One down. How about the others? They turned to see the courtyard in chaos. 3 more giants still raged, battling squads of first-grade sorcerers. Gojo's aura flared in the distance, a blinding swirl that signaled he was pushing infinity to its limits. Another monstrous curse, a towering humanoid with elongated limbs, collapsed as a team of senior sorcerers blasted it with coordinated techniques. Even so, the final 2 beasts wreaked havoc near the administrative building. Maki gripped her spear. "We need to help them." They dashed toward the next threat, pushing through debris-strewn pathways. Students who had stayed behind attempted to shield the dorms, forging small barriers to keep stray curses from entering. Rimuru blasted aside lesser creatures spawned by the larger curses. Nobara hammered nails into any that tried to flank them. Maki and Megumi sliced a path through the rubble. At last, they reached a broad courtyard where a winged abomination hovered above the rooftops. Its wingspan easily exceeded 20 meters, and each flap sent gusts of cursed wind that tore into the buildings. At its feet lay injured sorcerers, some unconscious, others groaning in pain. Shoko moved among them, frantically administering healing techniques. Her brow glistened with sweat, face pale. Without hesitation, Rimuru leapt skyward, chasing the flying curse. Maki and Nobara stayed on the ground, pulling wounded allies to safety. Megumi sent shadowy birds to harass the curse, drawing its attention. It let out an ear-splitting screech, launching slicing air blades from its wingtips. Rimuru dodged mid-air, ignoring the whistling danger. He retaliated with a spear-like construct of devouring power, aiming for the creature's center of mass. It shrieked, reeling as a chunk of feathered flesh disintegrated. Below, Shoko stabilized an injured sorcerer, then looked up, eyes anxious. Rimuru's up there alone? Maki shook her head, adrenaline surging. Megumi, distracted again. I'm going to launch Nobara. Nobara's eyes widened. Launch me? Maki gestured to her with a fierce grin. You can't fly, but if I throw you high enough, you can nail it from above. Despite the madness, Nobara smirked. I like the way you think. Megumi concentrated, summoning a large bird-like shikigami. It soared around the curse's head, pecking and slashing to divert its focus. Meanwhile, Maki clasped her hands together, bending slightly so Nobara could step onto them. She channeled cursed energy into her muscles, then hurled Nobara upward with a tremendous push. Nobara sailed into the sky, HA inched between her fingers. The winged curse shrieked, turning just in time to see Nobara flipping overhead. She let out a triumphant yell, hurling a barrage of nails downward. Each nail glowed with her cursed technique, trailing sparks of energy. They hammered into the creature's back and wings, cracking bone and shredding muscle. A final strike nailed the curse's spine, embedding deeply. Rimuru seized that moment from the front. He formed a shimmering blade of devouring energy around his forearm. With a single slash, he cleaved through the curse's torso. It tried to shriek, but only a ragged gurgle emerged as its body began dissolving under the combined assault. Nobara, dropping from above, landed gracefully on a half-broken rooftop. Rimuru stepped onto a ledge, watching the winged abomination disintegrate in black, feathery wisps. Maki and Megumi cheered from below, relief plain on their faces. Shoko nodded, tears shining in her eyes as she continued healing the wounded. Another monstrous threat neutralized. A moment later, a crushing wave of cursed energy erupted from the far side of campus. Everyone froze, hearts hammering. It was a presence so potent, so malevolent, that the air itself crackled. A single roar thundered across the sky, deeper and more dreadful than the combined howls of the giants. Even from a distance, Rimuru's blood ran cold. Gojo's voice rang out from somewhere beyond the campus wall. Get everyone clear, now. Maki's face went pale. What was that? Megumi swallowed hard. Something huge, stronger than these four combined. Rimuru darted to a vantage point, climbing a fractured section of wall. His eyes widened at the sight beyond. A colossal figure, easily the size of a small mountain, looming at the edge of the campus. It had a vaguely humanoid shape but was covered in writhing tentacles, each as thick as a building. Purple lightning danced around its body, and the ground caved beneath its immense weight. Surrounding it were squads of terrified sorcerers, many already incapacitated or fleeing. Gojo stood in front, infinity swirling violently, but even he seemed overshadowed by the sheer scale of the beast's cursed energy. Nobara scrambled up beside Rimuru, eyes wide with horror. That thing, oh god. Megumi joined them. We have to help. This might be the real master Tenma warned about. Rimuru's jaw clenched. No, I don't think this is it. But it's definitely part of his final plan. He felt a subtle difference. While the creature was unimaginably powerful, it didn't carry a coherent will. It was more like a final weapon unleashed, a pure manifestation of destructive negativity. Gojo launched himself skyward, sending a massive wave of blue energy at the titan. One of the tentacles snapped forward, absorbing the blast in a crackle of neon sparks. The recoil threw Gojo back several meters, infinity flaring to cushion the blow. Shoko, from behind a makeshift shield, looked on in alarm, unable to approach with so many lethal tentacles thrashing. Rimuru tightened his fists. "Stay here." He glanced at Maki, Nobara, and Megumi. "I can't let it get any closer to the school." Maki attempted to protest, but he cut her off with a firm shake of his head. "It's too dangerous. Protect the wounded. Help Shoko keep them safe. I'll join Gojo." She swallowed hard, but nodded, recognizing the necessity. Nobara's face showed a mix of frustration and trust. Megumi simply placed a hand on Rimuru's shoulder, giving a solemn nod. Rimuru leapt down from the wall, crossing the decimated grounds in blinding speed. Gojo noticed his approach, a grim smile flickering across his features. "Guess you're joining this party, Rimuru." The Titan bellowed again, purple lightning arcing from its tentacles. Entire sections of the campus wall disintegrated under the barrage. Gojo deflected some strikes with infinity, but the monstrous onslaught was relentless. Rimuru gathered his devouring aura, letting it swirl around him like a tangible storm. "Any idea how to crack this thing's defenses?" Rimuru shouted over the din. Gojo gritted his teeth. "It seems to generate a negative feedback loop. Every time I hit it, it converts my energy into more mass. We might have to destroy it from within, or sever it at the core in one blow." A thunderous crash rocked the earth as one massive tentacle slammed the ground near them, forcing them to dodge. Rimuru soared into the air, launching a devouring blast at the tentacle's base. It disintegrated a chunk of cursed flesh, but the gap reformed moments later, squirming with violent energy. Below, Gojo unleashed a flurry of compressed space attacks, each fracturing parts of the Titan's torso. Yet each time, the creature roared, doubling in size, as if feeding on the damage. Dust and debris billowed, turning day into night. Rimuru realized they were dealing with a self-amplifying curse that grew stronger the more raw energy it absorbed. Devouring alone wasn't enough if it could redirect that energy back into growth. He hovered for a second, mind racing. There had to be a precise method, perhaps targeting the true core, before it could adapt. Gojo leapt onto a high ridge of debris, infinity swirling. "We can't keep smashing it. This is insane." Rimuru joined him, scanning for any sign of a nucleus. Then, among the writhing mass, he spotted a faint glow near the creature's center, a pulsation that didn't match the rest. "There," he said, pointing. "That's got to be the heart." Gojo grimaced. "How do we get to it without feeding the monster more?" Rimuru steadied himself, a surge of determination blazing in his eyes. "We combine forces. Your infinity can shield me until I get inside. Once I'm close enough, I'll use a surgical devouring strike to remove the core." Gojo barked a laugh. "Risky, but I like it." No further words needed. They sprang into action. Gojo advanced first, letting infinity swirl around him in a protective bubble. The Titan unleashed a flurry of tentacle whips, each crackling with lethal cursed lightning. They skidded off Gojo's barrier, slowed to a near crawl by the infinite distance effect. Rimuru stayed behind him, focusing on maintaining a tight aura of devouring power. As they closed in, the curse roared, unleashing a wave of negative energy so potent it rattled the entire campus. Gojo winced. Even his infinity flickered momentarily under the overload. Rimuru seized the window, leaping past Gojo's barrier. He flew toward the Titan's chest, weaving through tentacles that slashed the air. One caught his shoulder, tearing his jacket and drawing dark blood. He gritted his teeth, letting his body absorb the cursed energy. Pain lanced through him, but he refused to slow. His gaze locked on the glowing pulsation at the creature's center. Adrenaline thundered in his veins. Time seemed to slow as he extended his arms, conjuring a compressed, razor-fine blade of devouring power. If he could just pierce that spot. A tentacle lunged from below, wrapping around his leg in a crushing grip. He gasped, nearly dropping his concentration. Another coil snaked around his waist, pulling him backward. The curse's multiple eyes glared with malevolent glee, as if sensing a meal. "Not today," Rimuru growled. He channeled a fierce surge of devouring aura into the tentacle. It shuddered, half dissolving, but the other coils tightened. Purple lightning crackled along them, threatening to rend him limb from limb. Then a streak of brilliant blue energy slashed across the tentacles, severing them. Gojo's infinity technique, sharpened into a near laser-like edge, freed Rimuru. The Titan roared in fury, but Rimuru used the opening, surging forward to bury his blade in the pulsing core. For an instant, everything went silent. The monstrous form convulsed, rearing back as a gash of pure azure light appeared in its chest. Rimuru pressed deeper, ignoring the cursed lightning scorching his arms. He unleashed the devouring blade at full power, commanding RT from within. A soundless explosion rocked the air. The Titan's body froze, then collapsed inward, as if an invisible black hole tore it apart cell by cell. Its roar turned into a low, gurgling moan, then vanished altogether. The writhing tentacles dissolved like ash caught in a tornado, leaving only swirling motes of cursed energy that quickly faded. Rimuru stumbled backward in midair, panting, arms numb from the lightning's sting. Gojo caught him, infinity warping space to cradle them both as they descended to the battered earth. The ground was pitted and smoking, but the Titan curse was no more. Silence. A hush of disbelief and relief passed through the surviving sorcerers. Then a cheer went up, exhausted voices celebrating the impossible victory. Gojo carefully set Rimuru down near the ruined main gate. Shoko rushed over, eyes scanning for injuries. Rimuru's jacket was scorched, skin marked with black burns where the lightning had struck, but he smiled wearily. "I'm okay. Just drained." Shoko exhaled in relief, using her technique to soothe the burns. That was reckless, but it worked. Gojo grinned, though his posture spoke of his own exhaustion. Teamwork, baby. Infinity plus a walking vortex of devouring. Hard to beat. Maki, Nobara, Megumi, and others arrived, faces streaked with dust and concern. Maki almost dropped her spear in her haste to reach Rimuru. "You're insane," she chided, though her trembling hands betrayed her relief. Nobara simply pressed her lips together, eyes shining with emotion. Megumi gave a small nod, respect in his gaze. Rimuru let out a slow breath, leaning back. "We stopped them, all of them." Indeed, the once peaceful campus was a ruin. 3 giant curses had melted into the earth, the other 2 also destroyed by squads of sorcerers. Casualties were not small. Multiple buildings lay in shambles, and wounded lay scattered across the courtyards. But the immediate threat had passed. The monstrous siege was over. As the adrenaline ebbed, Rimuru recalled Tenma's final words. "We may have stopped this wave, but the real puppet master is still out there." This was a test or a step in their plan. Gojo nodded grimly. "Yeah. We'll need to rebuild our defenses, heal our people, and prepare for the next level. That's if there is a next level." Rimuru's communicator crackled again with updates from other jujutsu schools. Similar attacks had occurred nationwide. Some schools had fared better, others worse. The scale of the devastation varied, but it was clear this was a coordinated assault on all major sorcerer hubs. Yet there was no trace of a single culprit. In the aftermath, the campus erupted into a flurry of rescue operations. Shoko took charge of triage, assisted by medics from allied sorcerer families. Maki, Nobara, and Megumi scrambled to clear debris, freeing those trapped beneath. Gojo directed able-bodied students to patch the walls and secure any remaining curses. Rimuru, despite his injuries, helped wherever he could, devouring large chunks of rubble to speed up the process. Hours bled into evening. Temporary lights illuminated the devastated grounds. Fire crews and first responders milled among the sorcerers. Gradually, the crisis stabilized, though the emotional toll was staggering. Students cried tears of relief or grief, some trembling with the realization of how close they'd come to annihilation. Under a makeshift medical tent, Rimuru finally found a moment to rest, slumping on a cot. Shoko insisted on giving him a thorough healing. His wounds closed, the charred patches of skin renewing under her skillful technique. Maki, battered but upright, stood guard at the entrance, spear resting across her back. Nobara slipped inside, quiet for once. She wore bandages around one arm, and dried blood spotted her uniform, but she smiled softly upon seeing Rimuru awake. "You're too stubborn to die, huh?" He offered a small grin. "You know me." She carefully sat beside him on the cot, ignoring the twinge in her arm. They shared a silence that spoke of relief and unspoken gratitude. After a moment, she bumped his shoulder lightly with her own, a playful gesture at odds with the gloom around them. He gently leaned into the contact. Then the tent flap opened again, and Maki ducked in. She glanced at Nobara, who returned the look with a faint smirk, then turned her gaze to Rimuru. We're done clearing the last bit of rubble. Gojo says he'll handle the official statements with the higher-ups. Everyone's been told to rest. Rimuru managed to swing his legs off the cot. Thanks, Maki. She gave him a look that spoke volumes: concern, admiration, exasperation. You can actually rest now, she said firmly. He stood slowly, testing the tenderness of his newly healed arms. Shoko, passing by, scolded him gently. Take it easy. Don't tear open what I just healed. Yes, doctor, he replied with a wry smile. Maki supported him as they left the tent. The campus glowed in the warm pools of emergency lights, making the devastation look almost surreal. Nobara followed them, and Megumi joined soon after, silent and watchful. The group ended up near the battered main building, where an intact bench offered a rare spot to sit. They sank onto it, weariness dragging at their limbs. Overhead, the night sky shimmered with stars, as if the universe was indifferent to their struggles. After a while, Nobara shifted, leaning on Rimuru's shoulder. Maki sat on his other side, letting him feel the warmth of her presence. Megumi stood close, arms folded, scanning the shadows. There was a quiet closeness among them, the bonds forged by shared danger and survival. A flicker of hesitation danced in Nobara's eyes. Then she closed them, shifting closer. Maki glanced over, a faint smirk tugging her lips, but no jealousy. Instead, she leaned her head against Rimuru's other shoulder, releasing a slow breath. The moment felt intimate, a solace from all the chaos. Even Megumi allowed a small, weary grin at the sight, though he remained stoic as ever. Rimuru exhaled softly, his mind drifting to Shoko, who was still working in the med tent, to Gojo, who was likely conferring with the elders, and to the countless sorcerers who had risked their lives. He felt a wave of gratitude and responsibility. Tenma was gone. The monstrous curses were defeated, yet the shadow of an even darker power loomed. He'd stand at the forefront, not alone, but with these precious allies who believed in him. Beneath the star-speckled sky, as sirens wailed in the distance and the taste of ash lingered on the wind, Rimuru closed his eyes. He could almost hear Sukuna's distant laugh, or maybe it was just the echo of fear in his own mind. One thing was certain. The battle for this world's future was far from over. But for tonight, at least, they had won a reprieve. He let himself sink into that rare tranquility, the comforting presence of Maki and Nobara grounding him. Come what may, he would face it all, master or curse, betrayal or ancient evil. Because in this moment, he realized he had more to protect than ever before, and he refused to falter. The night wore on, but none of them moved from that bench for a long time. They simply lingered in the fragile peace, hearts still thrumming with adrenaline, bodies slumped from exhaustion, yet united by the unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of battle. And as dawn approached once more, Rimuru found a steadfast certainty within himself. No matter the next threat, he would rise to meet it with overwhelming resolve, heart and power in perfect harmony. Chapter 3 End.